in the county of York.
The question is that I do issue my warrant to the Clerk of the Crown to make out the new writ for the electing of the member to serve in the present Parliament for the borough constituency of Aberdeen South in the room of Stephen Flynn, who since his election for the said borough constituency has been appointed to the office of Steward and Bailiff, His Majesty's Manor of Northstead in the county of York. As many of that opinion say aye. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. I never thought he would represent a Yorkshire constituency in England. Kirsty Blackton.
I beg to move that Mr Speaker do issue his warrant to the Clerk of the Crown to make out a new writ for the election of a member to serve in this present Parliament for the county constituency of Arbroath and Broughty Ferry in the room of Stephen Patrick Gethins, who since his election for the said county constituency has been appointed to the office of Steward and Bailiff of His Majesty's 3 Chiltern Hundreds of Stoke, Desborough and Burnham in the county of Buckingham.
The question is that I do issue my warrant to the Clerk of the Crown to make out the new writ for the electing of the member to serve in the present Parliament for the county constituency of Arbroath and Broughty Ferry in the room of Stephen Patrick Gethins, who since his election for the said county constituency has been appointed to the office of Steward and Bailiff of His Majesty's 3 Chiltern Hundreds of Stoke, Desborough and Burnham in the county of Buckingham. As many of that opinion say aye. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Even farther south for an English constituency. Right, we now come to private business. Motion to be moved. Sir Mark Tarmy. The question is as on the order paper. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to. What's the question on order paper? Statement. Yeah. We now come to the statement. The Secretary of State for Justice, Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very grateful, Mr Speaker. With permission, I'd like to make a statement on the youth justice system in England and Wales. Today I'm publishing a white paper with a once-in-a-generation set of reforms to build a youth justice system that intervenes early, that responds more effectively and does more to turn young lives around so that we can better protect the public. And for this, I'm very grateful to the member for Rother Valley and before him, the member for Scunthorpe, for all their hard work in getting us to this point. Over the past 2 decades, the number of children entering the youth justice system and detained in custody has fallen dramatically. This progress is the result of a real cross-party consensus, a modern youth justice system that began under Tony Blair's government and was continued by Lord Cameron, who famously said he would hug a hoodie during his time as Prime Minister, who with Lord Gove asked me to carry out the Lammy Review. But this success has brought a new challenge. Our justice system is now working with significantly fewer, but significantly more vulnerable young people at significantly higher risk. Most begin their journey into crime long before they come to the attention of the police. Their lives shaped by instability, by trauma, and often by neglect. The kind of childhood that most of us in this House could barely imagine. Some grow up surrounded by violence, addiction, and abuse. Others are moved endlessly around children's homes or foster care placements, never staying in one place long enough for the stability to feel safe, let alone the love and care that would enable them to really thrive. All are factors which make them more likely to end up in the justice system. And when we fail to intervene early enough, the consequences can be devastating. For those children, of course, but for the victims also, and for entire communities, because, Mr Speaker, around 80% of prolific adult offenders first enter the justice system as children. The risks children face have also changed, of course. Today's children are navigating online harms, criminal grooming through social media, and exposure to extremist content. Too often, the system has struggled, frankly, to keep pace. Opportunities to intervene are missed. Warning signs go unnoticed, and agencies do not consistently share information. This means children can slip through the cracks between services, which of course risks escalation, and responsibility between those agencies becomes blurred. The lessons emerging from the Southport inquiry following the tragic murders of 3 young children by Axel Rudicabana, a violent 17-year-old who was known to authorities, are a terrible reminder of what can happen when systems are not sufficiently coordinated, not sufficiently decisive in the face of escalating concerns. We must learn those lessons and also strike the right balance. The system must recognise that they are still developing and that most have huge capacity to change. We should not over-criminalise, but at the same time, avoiding criminalisation must never mean overlooking risk or failing to act. Benign neglect, however well-intentioned, is still neglect. Where behaviour causes harm, timely, proportionate and effective intervention is essential to protect the public and support children to change course. That principle is reflected throughout this white paper. First, we will intervene earlier, investing an additional £46 million over the next 3 years in our turnaround programme, which is already showing promising results in diverting children away from crime, and by strengthening Join Up with other programmes that support children on the cusp of offending. We'll also strengthen and expand the use of parenting orders, which can compel parents to address their child's behaviour, including attending counselling or guidance sessions, and if they do not act, they will face penalties. And we will deliver on our manifesto commitment to introduce an offence of child criminal exploitation, building on the work carried out by others, including, of course, Baroness May, placing the focus where it belongs, on the adults who groom, the adults who coerce, the adults who profit from exploiting children. And through the new diversion orders, we will tackle the increasing number of young people who commit terrorism offences, allowing agencies to intervene before that risk escalates. Mr. Speaker, where offending does happen, we will make sure children get the right response at the right time. Diversion must be firm, fair and effective. We will fundamentally reform the Youth Out of Court resolution framework to improve consistency and public confidence, so children receive interventions that genuinely address their behaviour and cut crime. We will also pilot problem-solving youth intervention courts, laser-focused on rehabilitation and prevention. They bring together judges, youth workers, specialist support to tackle the root causes of offending, whether mental ill health, school absence, addiction or exploitation, while still demanding accountability from young offenders, of course. Mr. Speaker, custody will always be necessary for the most dangerous offences. But for many children, even a short spell inside can deepen their problems, exposing them to more violence and criminal influence. So we're setting an ambition to cut the number of children remanded into custody by 25% over this Parliament, alongside an intention to reduce the use of short custodial sentences, which so often are ineffective, with more than 2/3 of children going on to re-offend. Instead, we'll invest £5 million in intensive community placements and stronger bail support, protecting the public while giving children a genuine chance to change course. Mr. Speaker, we will also reform the childhood criminal records regime, because the mistakes made at 13 should not become a life sentence of closed doors and lost chances, not least where this prevents young people from getting a job, a crucial factor in helping offenders turn their lives around. And we will carefully consider the age of criminal responsibility in this country, which currently sits at just 10 years old. This still reflects modern understanding of childhood, vulnerability and development. We'll also strengthen local youth justice services so they're better equipped to meet the needs of today's children. We will soon set out detailed proposals for a new approach to youth justice oversight and funding arrangements so that children receive consistently high quality support wherever they live. This includes reforming the Youth Justice Board to sharpen its focus on continuous improvement of local services and transform some key board functions to the Ministry of Justice so that ministers are fully accountable for how the system performs. And while I've been clear that custody will, where appropriate, be necessary for public safety, we will take further action to improve safety and education across the youth estate while setting a clear, long-term direction of travel away from large, outdated institutions towards smaller settings that can better rehabilitate children. Mr. Speaker, this white paper is also about fairness. Not all children in our justice system are equal. Those in care are still far more likely to be drawn into the system. Black children remain vastly overrepresented, some 22% of the youth custodial population, compared to just 6% of 10 to 17-year-olds, but also as victims themselves, being around 6 times more likely to be victims of homicide. I warned about this disproportionality when David Cameron asked me to do the Lammy review nearly a decade ago. The fact it still persists today should shame us all. These reforms begin to address that, building a system that's fairer and more consistent. Mr. Speaker, there is not a choice between punishment and rehabilitation. It's about what works, protecting the public, cutting reoffending and stopping vulnerable children, so often victims themselves, from becoming tomorrow's dangerous adult offenders. This government will do whatever it takes to give more children the chance of a better future and to keep the British public safe. I commend this statement to the House.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are, it's obvious now, in the legacy hunting stage of this government. Less a range of exhausted volcanoes, more a row of trampled molehills. Ministers are desperate to be remembered for something. This morning, a word cloud was published by the pollsters at More in Common. The public was asked for the Prime Minister's greatest achievement. Emblazoned across the page in huge capital letters was the sad word, nothing. But today's announcement is a fitting tribute to the Justice Secretary and his predecessor. So desperate are they to find the causes of crime, they sometimes forget that their job is to prevent and punish crime itself. The truth is, Labour just don't have it in their DNA to be tough on crime. They've let 60,000 criminals out of jail early. They're abolishing short-term sentences, so almost all shoplifters and the majority of knife criminals will no longer be sent to prison. And they're pretending they're doing these things because they have to. But they're doing them because they want to. The Prisons Minister says only a third of prisoners should be locked up. The Sentencing Minister says a pretty big chunk of the overall population shouldn't be in prison. And today's announcement is more of the same, so I have some specific questions for the Right Honourable Gentleman. He wants to increase the age of criminal responsibility to reflect, quotes, a modern understanding of childhood, vulnerability and development. From smoking bans to voting rights, this government has a confused view of childhood. So what should be the age of criminal responsibility? With the wave of sexual and violent crime committed by illegal immigrants, many of whom pretend to be children, can he guarantee that these people will not escape justice a second time by faking their real age to the police? The government says it will review the function and purpose of criminal courts for child defendants. But the purpose of a criminal court is obvious. It's to try criminals. So can the Justice Secretary rule out abolishing criminal trials for under 18s? The government also says it wants to end lifelong disclosure requirements for the under 18s. Can he guarantee that those requirements will still apply for those guilty of violent crime and prolific offenders? The government says it will slash custodial remand for young offenders by a quarter. But remand should be used in response to need, not arbitrary targets. So what is his alternative? Will he just send criminals home? And will he stick to this target regardless of the level of violent crime and repeat offending? The government wants more parenting orders, but this morning the Justice Secretary said they're not used much at the moment because all judges can do to enforce them is issue a fine. He was unclear on this question. So will ministers who don't comply face jail? The figures, you were asked, the Right Honourable Gentleman was asked on the radio this morning whether parents who do not comply will face custodial sentences themselves, and he fudged that question, so I'm asking him to answer it now. The figures show young repeat offenders often start with theft and move on to drug offences and violence. Yet the government's big idea is to stop punishing swathes of crimes committed by under-18s. The gangs who swarm shops to steal goods in places like Oxford Street, Ilford and Clapham don't need to be put on a course. They need clear punishment, and that can include prison. Mr. Speaker, the results of soft-touch liberalism are visible in towns and cities up and down the country, yet the changes the Justice Secretary is announcing today risk amounting to more of the same. This is a big call, and if youth crime goes up as a result, it will be on this government.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Tories have a mixed record when it comes to youth justice and keeping young people out of criminality. We should remember their cuts to local authority spending saw a huge fall in council services for young people, about 70% in real terms. £1 billion was lost whilst they were in power. This led to the closure of many youth clubs, a reduction to outreach work, which was vital to keeping those young people on the right track. Youth workers completely undermined. All that early intervention work stopped. An entire generation sacrificed at the altar of austerity. They also, and the member for West Suffolk will know about this because he was right at the driving wheel of this. They cut 20,000 police officers, 7,000 PCSOs, leading to a collapse in visible neighbourhood policing. And on their watch, over, and this really is just, he really should listen to this. On their watch, over 1,000 Sure Start centres closed, early intervention demolished on their watch. But I said it was a mixed record because there was a fall in the number of first-time entrants into the youth justice system. It peaked at around 110,000 back in 2007, but it had fallen to just 7,500 whilst they were in office in 2023. When they entered government, there were around 2,000 children in youth custody. By the end of their tenure, it had fallen to just over 1,000. These were great achievements. It's interesting that the honourable gentleman doesn't want to celebrate those achievements that begun under David Cameron and Michael Gove. He asks about the age of criminal responsibility. He will know the Bar Council is consulting on this issue, and I look forward to receiving the conclusions of their work. He's asked about foreign national offenders. We're absolutely clear in this consultation that we will look at those 16 and 17-year-olds that arrive in our country from somewhere else, commit a violent crime. I'm afraid they'll be deported. We're really clear about that, and we've driven up deportation in our country. He asks about whether we are abolishing the youth court, whether we are abolishing the criminal standard. Of course we're not. But we are consulting on youth intervention courts because just as we've seen in the family area in our FDAC courts, problem-solving approaches, gripping the young person, gripping their parents, gripping those that work with them, looking at the addiction issues that sit there, looking at mental health, giving them support, holding the multidisciplinary teams to account can really make a difference, and we stand by that. He asks about young people on remand. We want to recruit the new generation of specialist foster carers. Much better to have a responsible, loving adult. We used to have them. They abolished them. We want to bring them back and grow them so we can support these young people. A range of things that we can do in this white paper. And I encourage him to read it in detail, because a lot of his predecessors would agree with it. It's a good work and we need to get on with it.
Joe's Lake Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the white paper, which shines a welcome light on an often neglected part of the criminal justice system. The remarkable drop in numbers of young people in custody from a high of 3,400 a day is sometimes box-ticked as job done. But when half those young people are on remand, and a majority of those don't go on to receive a custodial sentence, there's clearly more to be done. The Justice Committee is currently conducting an inquiry into children and young adults in a secure state, while the government's right to look at early intervention and alternatives to custody. Will the Lord Chancellor also look at the successes and failures of the current custodial system for young people and how it can better rehabilitate and reduce the risk of reoffending?
We will look at this and do the necessary inquiry, and I know that his Select Committee is doing that work at the moment. He is concerned, quite rightly, about the huge rates both of prolific crime and recidivism. And clearly the system isn't working with this group of young people now present in the system, sometimes over 2/3 of them going on to reoffend. We must do better, we can do better, and we do put rehabilitation at the heart of this youth justice white paper.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Jess Brown-Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's white paper represents a truly critical opportunity to transform the youth justice system and, importantly, reduce lifetime offending. We know that most offenders in our prison today are repeat offenders, and that persistent offending often begins early in life, with 8 in 10 prolific offenders in England and Wales committing their first crime as a child. So we must stop this chain of escalation, and the earlier we intervene, the better. Nowhere is this more applicable than for children in care, those from ethnic minorities and those with special educational needs who are disproportionately represented in the justice system. Will the Minister set out how this overhaul will ensure that these children, given their specific vulnerabilities, will receive the targeted support that they so desperately need? And can I take the opportunity to highlight the great work of the organisation Shift and encourage the Deputy Prime Minister to engage with them, because I do believe that their model could be rolled out across the country before these young people even commit their first crime. Education for young offenders can be a crucial step in diverting them from a path to reoffending. We're pleased that the Children's Commissioner will undertake a review into education in YOIs, but can the Justice Secretary ensure that this will take into account 80% of young people sentenced have special educational needs and make sure that the support that they're getting in those institutes is fit for purpose? Mr. Speaker, the Youth Justice Board provides vital independent oversight of the youth justice system. Yet the government has chosen not to act on the report it commissioned from Steve Crocker, instead bringing a number of its functions more directly within the remit of the Ministry of Justice. What is the purpose of these reforms? What benefit will they gain from bringing it in-house? And will the Justice Secretary address the concerns across the sector that they risk reducing specialist experience and weakening independent accountability? And finally, will the Minister set out how the use of parenting orders will affect the recruitment of foster parents, those being asked to take on special guardianship orders or kinship arrangements, or those considering adoption? And if they won't apply to those families, how will they be supported effectively to ensure that it doesn't lead to further family breakdowns and more children ending up in the care system?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for the manner in which she puts her remarks and her understanding that we have seen this evolving door, that 2/3 of children and young people released from custody are going on to reoffend, and we've got to do something about it, and that many of those young people are extremely vulnerable. Thank her for mentioning the cohort of young people, way too many, who are within the care system, and I'm very grateful that the Minister for Care is alongside me and takes a huge interest in the work that we do together as departments to deal with this area. She raises young people who are adopted. She knows that I'm a parent of an adopted child. I take these issues extremely seriously. And she's right, we are looking in totality at the way that parenting orders have worked. She will recognise that there must be something going wrong if the amount of parenting orders that were issued over the last decade have fallen from over 1,000 to just 33 last year. So we've got to look at it in the round and ensure that our judges have the right tools to support parents and guardians over this next period. She raises the reforms we're making to the Youth Justice Board. It's still the case, if you look across the country, that there's a postcode lottery. And we've got to eliminate that postcode lottery. Also, because of online harms, because of grooming, because of mental health, because of neurodiversity, and I was in Feltham recently and I saw the good work that they're doing with young people who are neurodiverse, it is important that the department itself, working with our colleagues in DFES, working with our colleagues at Health, do bring some of these powers back to the centre so we can get coherence across the country and end that postcode lottery. Very grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this statement and the white paper. Can I ask the Minister what steps he's taking to ensure that programmes like Turnaround are felt in constituencies like mine in Colchester and beyond?
Well, I'm very grateful to her for mentoring Turnaround, which is such an important scheme begun under the last government, but continued under us, making a big difference at diverting these young people. I will look closely at its use in her constituency particularly. But what we are absolutely clear on is not just diverting them, but ensuring that we're diverting them to quality. And when we look at the recidivism rates of 7%, this is an exceptional turnaround programme.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Secretary of State about two things? First of all, education, which he's mentioned. It is, of course, important to look at education for those young people in a custodial setting, but would he agree with me it's also important to consider the link between attendance at education and rehabilitation for those who've received non-custodial disposals? Will he ensure that the proposals he makes make that link very clear? And secondly, in relation to advocacy on behalf of young people within the youth justice system, he will recognise that with a smaller number of young people going through the system, it's more and more difficult to maintain a specialist advocacy profession and to make sure they are properly rewarded for the very specific skills they need to develop. So can I ask him to look at the fee structure for advocates and make sure that we continue to encourage the right balance of skills and attention to conferences and getting to know the client that's particularly important for young people in the youth justice system?
We're very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman, of course, his expertise in these areas. He's right to mention the education system and the role it plays, not just for those in custody, and there is more to do for young people in custody in relation to education. Too many of them during the pandemic spending time in their cells and not outside their cells actually getting skills. But particularly, and ensuring that where you previously had just volunteer panels keeping up to date with these young people in communities, that we are looking a bit closer at the role of the judge and professionals in those referrals to make sure that that education is actually taking place, and again to get that more multidisciplinary approach in terms of the outcomes of those young people. And I thank him for mentioning special advocacy. I want to assure him that my honourable friend is looking closely at this and is chairing a group looking specifically at the issues.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the white paper. My right honourable friend has already acknowledged that 80% of prolific offenders first offend as children, and 2/3 of children reoffend within a year after being released from custody. So does he agree that early and fast intervention is crucial to cut crime? And can he please also outline what specific youth provision, including mental health help, is available to young people in my constituency of Wolverhampton West to deal with this issue?
Well, I will look specifically at his constituency, and it should be the case that turnaround and diversion work can make a difference, and I hope it's making a difference in his patch. I should tell him that I met with the previous Health Secretary to discuss these issues, and I look forward to taking them up with the new Health Secretary in the coming days.
Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Lord Chancellor for his statement? The Justice Affairs Select Committee heard that there were only 412 young people in custody as of February 2026, of whom about 44% are on remand. So when the Lord Chancellor says with a great flourish he intends to reduce the number by 25%, he's actually talking of reducing a very small number, about 185, down to about 135. It's a very small number of individuals. And I would just put to him that rather than making a huge effort, as he appears to be doing in this very small reduction, his efforts would be better spent on improving education and training within the youth custody system.
Well, I say very gently to the honourable gentleman that you can do both. Improve the education system in our youth custody system, and I entirely accept there's more to do, particularly coming out of COVID and particularly because of chronic underinvestment by his party. But I'd also just encourage him to think a bit harder about that remand population. There is, of course, tremendous churn amongst those 400 young people who are currently in custody, and therefore we're not talking about a slither of 25% adding up to 135. That's not the case. It's significantly more than that, because over the course of a year, we are getting into the thousands of young people. He shakes his head. That is basic maths.
Andrew Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the White Paper and put on record my thanks to the Right Honourable Friend, but also my Honourable Friend, the Minister for Youth Justice, for their work on this issue. Mr. Speaker, one of the most heartbreaking things I get to do as a Member of Parliament is meet families and young people who have been failed by the system and taken actions which have caused disturbance for their families but the wider community. Accountability matters, but one of the crushing realities I've learned as an MP is that state failure plays a large part in the criminality we see and lack of options for young people. Can my right honourable friend reassure me that youth intervention courts and others will begin to address not just the criminality and accountability, but the lack of opportunity in training, in caring, in support and education, and particularly in my passion for apprenticeships, so that we divert people from prison in the first place, but those in custody have opportunities when they come out as well?
Very grateful to my honourable friend, and of course I know his city of Peterborough very well. Peterborough has a vibrant third sector. We've got to get them involved with those young people in communities, offering them opportunities. And there's no doubt about it, skills and training, and Peterborough again and the whole of the East Anglia area has lots of opportunities, and we want those young people taking them up.
Dylan.
There are many announcements made within this white paper that, as Liberal Democrats, we can support. So I gently ask the Deputy Prime Minister that what evidence does the government have that the potential threat of a prison sentence will be an effective mechanism for compliance with a parental order? Have the government done an impact assessment, and how can you guarantee that the use of stricter punishment will not adversely affect the outcomes for that child involved?
Well, I recognise why the honourable gentleman has raised this. It's extremely rare you would expect a judge to remit someone to custody or a parent to custody in this circumstances, but I think he will agree that the judge only having a fine effectively does need reform, and that's why we've seen parenting orders come down. It is important that we're there to support parents, to encourage parents, and I was hugely shocked, really, to sit in Highbury Magistrates Court recently with a lot of young people facing quite serious offences, no parent in sight.
Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and welcome the publication of the White Paper today. Education has a vital role to play in reducing youth offending. We know that there is a strong link between offending the offences committed by young people and educational disengagement earlier on in their lives. Can I ask the Secretary of State what he is doing to ensure that the government's work in the Department for Education on persistent absence, on exclusions, on SEND and on support for care experienced young people are properly joined up to ensure that they have a focus on removing disengagement from education and reducing youth offending. And while I welcome the work that he has asked the Children's Commissioner to do on the quality of education in the youth offending youth offending institutions, we know already that the quality of that education is abysmally poor and that action is urgently needed. So can I ask him to set a timescale on that so that we can know when we will see the positive change that's so urgently needed?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for taking up these issues and championing these issues. I hope she sees an indication of the two ministers who are working hand in hand and sitting on the interministerial group to direct this activity. There is more to do on education in the youth custody context. There's more to do on neurodiversity and its prevalence amongst this cohort of young people, and we have to extend that work into communities and join up better with local child, adolescent and mental health services as well.
Sir Julian.
May I ask the Justice Secretary to explain a bit more about the intensive community placements to which he made brief reference? And can I put to him a particularly challenging scenario? Imagine that we have, say, a single parent, a single mum, who is very much afraid of her own adolescent child. She is aware that that child has been getting at machetes and other violent accessories through the internet-related delivery services. Let's imagine that she does what she's supposed to do and what we would all think she ought to do, which is report that child. What protection, given that no offence has yet been committed by the child, will be offered to her against potentially lethal violence from her own adolescent son?
He raises a very serious issue, and it lies at the heart of this, because what we are seeing is young people, particularly this prolific cohort, becoming addicted, often addicted online, often groomed, and these are where the knives and sadly the terrorism comes in. This is not a standalone policy. Here, the work of Prevent, the police, social services matters. Here, we have to do better to join up, and that is a signal we got following the Fulford inquiry into what happened in Southport. This is an attempt to move absolutely directly in that direction, recognising that that addictive behaviour that now we're seeing with a cohort of young people, and often they're neurodiverse, we need to support parents to get this right, and an intensive supervision court can make a real difference and put a judge right in the centre of that ring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I truly welcome this statement and indeed the White Paper. I'm really pleased to see in this statement consultation to end lifelong disclosure to ensure that a child or young person's poor choices in their early life does not define their adult future prospects. And my right honourable friend will be aware of the work that I had been doing with Fair Checks and indeed with Penelope Gibbs. However, I would suggest to my right honourable friend that he consider how tougher accountability of parents or carers could go on to further affect the stability within families, especially where they feel they have been failed by earlier interventions or intervention services. So will my right honourable friend agree to meet with me to further discuss this?
Well, very grateful to my honourable friend, not just for championing these issues from the backbenches, but for the tremendous work she did while she was Children's Minister. She'll be pleased that I did meet with Penelope Gibbs just last week to discuss these very same issues. And I'm very, very happy to meet with my honourable friend to look at what more we can do. This is an important consultation. A third of people on job seekers allowance have got an offence. We've got to do something to make sure that these things aren't following young people for the rest of their lives.
Let's have a look.
Devolving youth justice powers is hardly a novel argument, and the White Paper itself acknowledges Wales's action on the prevention of youth offending. So can the Secretary of State clarify whether Labour will finally listen to the people of Wales who have elected a government clear in its stance on devolution and allow Wales full powers over justice?
I look forward to meeting the new team in Wales soon to discuss what more we can do together.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm so pleased that early intervention and working with families is at the heart of this government's approach. As a former Cabinet Member for Children's Services in Denbighshire, I know just how important this is. So I wonder if my right honourable friend can set out how increased investment in programmes like Turnaround will help children in Clwyd North before they enter the justice system.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for asking the question, as she knows from her experience how vital this is. And it goes back to this point that I was making before about the postcode lottery that we see across the country. We've got to even up the standards. We've got to make sure that there's a sort of universal element to this. And it's not just a pick and mix local authority to local authority. It's why I'm bringing powers back to the centre from the Youth Justice Board, but also empowering the Youth Justice Board to drive change and innovation in local communities. And it's why absolutely continuing that funding, that 46 million over the next 3 years for Turnaround.
Let's be honest. Thousands, tens of thousands of young people have been let down in this country by successive governments. He refers in his statement, to paraphrase, those in care are drawn disproportionately into the justice system. All that wasted talent, in my view, forgive me, God-given talent, wasted. We talk about productivity in this country. What about social productivity? What about social justice for those young people in care homes? Completely wasted talent, going from children's homes, paid by the state, into prison, paid by the state. And whilst I welcome some of what the Secretary of State has said today, the fact is, whilst the government and the previous governments have lectured parents on how to parent, the worst parent of all, look at the evidence, look at the data, is the government itself. So would he work with the Secretary of State for Education to ensure that social workers in whatever part of this country keep an eye on what young people are doing at school, to follow up when they're failing in their exams, and to ensure they leave school with qualifications in order that less of them are going to end up in the criminal justice system?
Well, I know the honourable gentleman because we've been friends across this House for many years, has a deep Christian faith like me, and one heard the power of redemption in his voice. I've long believed that the phrase looked after is one of the biggest oxymorons in the English language. Those kids are not sufficiently looked after, which is why I'm so grateful that my honourable friend, the Minister, is sat beside me and is doing such considerable work to turn this system around.
Adam Joe.
Speaker, my constituents want and deserve a justice system that's fit for purpose, that delivers justice for victims and tackles crime properly and effectively. Now, that said, Mr Speaker, poverty and deprivation play a very important role here. So can the Deputy Prime Minister assure me that there is a proper and effective cross-government approach? I know he's mentioned the Department for Education, but it goes further than that at the heart of this strategy, because we need a carrot and stick approach, not just words.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and he knows from his long experience in local government too, that the role that local government plays alongside mental health services and education is vital, and we've got to do much better to join up. Whenever something goes vitally wrong, it's usually because the services have not been sufficiently joined up, and that's why I think these new intensive supervision course in this particular area for young people can make a real difference.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My 20 years experience in the courts has watched a change in attitude from young people. There is no respect anymore for the courts when they walk into the courtroom. There is no fear of the police, and prison sentences are no longer a deterrent, or whether it's young offenders institutes, because they're simply not given out. When you're in court, you very rarely see any parents in support for lots of different reasons, often because these children are always neglected, whether it's through parents already battling alcohol or drugs themselves, or financial issues out at work, or whether it's children in a care system that's letting them down. I visited care homes where I know they let youngsters below age go out at night and prostitute themselves because nobody could keep an eye on them. Nobody could control them. So the care system fails these kids too. But what I witness in places like Runcorn and Helsby, my constituency, still now, are kids that are going out in gangs, subject to organised crime gangs. They need opportunities, they need apprenticeships.
One of us is going to give way, it's not going to be me. No, order, please sit down immediately. Look, in this question, I'm going to get everybody in. If you want to put a statement in an adjournment, I'm sure there's many other ways, but you can't just hog the whole of this debate. Seriously.
This was one of the few occasions, I think, ever that I've agreed with the Honourable Lady on the context for these young people, and I think she brings to the Chamber tremendous experience as a magistrate in this area. We can agree for children in care, for the adult grooming that we're seeing, often parents not present in the criminal justice system. We've got to do more to support them. I think she'll find a lot in this white paper that perhaps Reform can adopt as their policy for the next election.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for recognising the disproportionality that still exists within the criminal justice system for our black communities. But, Mr Speaker, education and diversionary activities are absolutely central to early intervention. And after the anti-Muslim hate marches and anti-Muslim rhetoric we saw at the so-called Unite the Kingdom march this weekend, how will the government ensure this white paper provides our schools and youth providers the tools they need to prevent young people being radicalised and exploited by hateful, violent ideologies?
I know that my honourable friend has a tremendous track record on championing issues of disproportionality in this House and beyond this place, and we're grateful for all the work that she does in this area. And she's absolutely right that what we're gripping in this white paper, coming up to date, is looking at the online harms facing our most vulnerable young people, sitting in a care context, sitting without sufficient parenting, often groomed into terrorism, groomed into vile hate. We've got to do something about it, and there are adults that we can gather together to make a difference in their lives.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I appreciate what the Justice Secretary wants to try and achieve here in terms of reducing the rate of recidivism. He said in his statement that custody will always be necessary for the most dangerous offences, and then went on to say an intention to reduce the use of short custodial sentences. Could you just add some more detail around what the length of sentence he considers to be a short custodial sentence? Particularly with regards to, I want to bring this back to something like knife crime. He'll know that the minimum offence for threatening with a knife can be as little as 6 months. Young people already don't have much of a fear of being searched for a knife or, in fact, facing the criminal justice system. What sort of deterrent will be in place in order to deter them from carrying a knife or using a knife if they know that they won't receive a custodial sentence at the end of it?
And behind the honourable gentleman's question is a very serious issue. The evidence suggests that short custodial sentences have poor outcomes for recidivism of almost up to 2/3, where good community support has far better outcomes, recidivism down by about 1/3. But that isn't about leaving these young people just to their own devices in the community. With tagging, with specialist foster care, with secure accommodation in communities, one can make a real difference and ensure that young people are monitored, where that doesn't sometimes happen in big institutions.
Jenko.
Mr Speaker, it feels very clear that the lack of early years intervention in the last 14 years, the lack of SEND support and those youth service cuts have let down a generation of our children. How will those youth intervention courts bring together those agencies to tackle those entrenched root causes that we have now, like mental health and that disengagement with school?
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and I should also call to mind the work of the Secretary of State and her youth guarantee and all of her work to ensure that young people have opportunities wherever they live in the country. Turnaround is making a difference in bringing those services together. We are remodelling the Youth Justice Board, bringing more back to the centre so that we can ensure consistency across the country. At this time, expertise in these areas, particularly in the areas of online harm, do not always exist out there in communities. We need to do better.
John Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, I visited Leeds Trinity University and met with a group of future teachers. They were talking about the exclusion to offending pipeline that's in our schools and about the challenges that they have when it comes to SEND children and meeting their needs. So I wondered if the Justice Minister would be able to elaborate further on what tangible steps his department will be taking with the DfE to get this right.
Well, I am pleased that under the new government we've gripped the pupil referral unit scandal that was happening up and down the country, in which too many young people weren't even attending the pupil referral unit. They were effectively on the streets. And then when they did attend the pupil referral unit, they weren't really being supported either therapeutically or educationally. That lottery is coming to an end under this government. You're absolutely, it's a pipeline into crime, and we have to be joined up, not just for those young people in custody, in the criminal justice sense, but those young people who often are a pipeline into custody if the pupil referral unit's not working as successfully as it should.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently hosted a screening of a short film called The Orphan, which is about a dramatisation about a boy caught up in county lines activity. It was directed by Leo Powell and supported by Stevenage Borough Council, put across our local schools. So I welcome the white paper today, and particularly the new offence of child criminal exploitation, but also the other early intervention measures in there, including the turnaround programme. So can the Secretary of State say more about how that programme can really help tackle the disgrace of county lines?
At this point, actually, it's important. I'm very grateful to my honourable friend to mention the County Lines programme that sits with the Home Office, but we in the Ministry of Justice work very closely with, that's making a difference. The absolute scandal of young people as young as 10 and 11 travelling up and down the country, ferrying drugs. No one knew where they were, what school they went to, no support. We are bringing that to an end, and we are seeing, for the first time in a long time, knife crime falling, and those young people falling into those county lines now coming down.
Lincoln John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. Is he not concerned that by reducing the relative punishment for youth offending relative to adult offending, that he may inadvertently be making the young people of Spelthorne, and indeed across the country, more attractive to be recruited by county line gangs? It would clearly be an unintended consequence of his actions. But if it turns out that is the case, will he think again?
I want to assure him that that won't be the case. At the moment, when you look at those 412 young people who are in custody, and they're there for public protection, they have to be there. Many of those young people are there because of very violent crimes. Some of those young people are serving very long sentences. And of course, public protection must always come first. But this white paper does recognise the modern world, the world that we live in, does recognise the vulnerability now of the particular cohort that we're talking about, which has changed vastly from 20 years ago. And there's more that we can do with agencies to support these young people, particularly in communities, so they're not criminalised, mixing and then going on to the adult prison to reduce the overall numbers.
Christopher Bent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am the member for Harlow, if people are wondering. Can I start by thanking the Can I start by thanking the Deputy Prime Minister for his really important statement and the non-partisan way in which he gave it. Can I also welcome the fact that he's sitting next to my honourable friend, the Children's, Family and Wellbeing Minister. It strikes me, listening to members across the chamber, that to really make a difference to young people in my constituency of Harlow, but across the UK, we have to make sure that government departments don't work in silos. So can I ask him what work he's doing with the DfE, with the DWP and the Department for Health and Social Care to ensure that we don't let any young people in my constituency and beyond left behind?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for the work that he does in Harlow, and he knows I know Harlow very well because it happens to be the second home of Spurs supporters in the country. He will be pleased that just 2 weeks ago I was sat with the Secretary of State for Education and my honourable friend discussing these issues on the interministerial board that we have, looking at children in care particularly and their outcomes, what more we can do, what more we can join up, and how we can continue to make a difference for them. And they are a particular group that I'm determined over the 5 years that we have of this term in government, and it is 5 years, there's been some speculation it might be less in recent days, we are going to make a difference for looked after children.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the proposals, fairly comprehensive proposals that will hopefully seek to address young people either in the criminal fraternity or on the cusp of entering the criminal fraternity. We all know that prevention is better than a cure. The old adage that idle hands become a devil's workshop come to mind. In Birmingham, where we have a population where a third are under the age of 20, we've lost a significant number of youth centres, 59 in 2011. They are reduced to 16. What will the Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State do to address this? And will he join me in commending voluntary organisations such as Real Aston Football Club, parents coming together to fill that vacuum and supporting our young children?
Well, I hope that he will recognise the work that Turnaround's doing in Birmingham to make a difference, to create the effective diversionary activity for these young people so they do not continue in a life of crime. He's absolutely right about the devastating cuts that we saw to youth centres across the country. It will take some time to rebuild them, but I know both the Department for Communities and Local Government, working with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, have a strategy. They've set about that strategy in a youth guarantee that exists for the young people of Birmingham as well.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I very much welcome the Secretary of State's statement today, and it would be churlish, I would feel, of anyone in this chamber not to welcome the white paper proposals that put forward in a positive fashion. And can I perhaps maybe point to and help the Secretary of State in a gentle way? The Youth Justice Agency in Newton Ards and Strangford in my constituency are doing a phenomenal job in liaising with young offenders to help them to understand the impact of crime on victims. Reoffending rates of those who have been attending the Youth Justice Agency in Newton Ards are significantly reduced. So could I perhaps maybe just request that the Secretary of State would share what is intended to do here with so much understanding and development, and that can be one that all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland can benefit from. Newton Ards are doing it, let's do it here as well.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman, and we're working with Jacob Dunn on the issue of restorative justice particularly. You know, he was involved in that Punch situation to make a difference, and I hope to get to Northern Ireland over the coming months particularly, because I know there's very good work in this area that goes on there.
Please, the statement.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, first one on his feet. Point of order, Gregory Stafford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I seek your guidance on a long-established convention of this House that members notify other members when they intend to visit another member's constituency in an official or political capacity. Over the weekend, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, the Right Honourable Member for Kingston and Surbiton, together with two of his parliamentary colleagues and a member of the Labour Party, undertook engagements in the Farnham and Tilford parts of my constituency. No notification of any of these visits was received by my office. Given that the leader of the Liberal Democrats is frequently vocal on questions of standards, rules and propriety in public life, could you advise whether it's consistent with the expectations of this House that such a convention appears not to have been observed on this occasion? And in light of the fact that this concerns relates directly to members across the House...
Don't overstretch it. You want a good answer, not a bad one. Look, no, I've not answered this one first, please. Can I just say, I reiterate once again, I don't care whether you're the leader of a party, Prime Minister, backbench, whoever you are not, or even a possible future Prime Minister, not even, and let us be honest, you have to do the due courtesy. You must let the member know. Unless it's on private business, you must do that. The courtesy of the House must be upheld. I don't care who you are, do that. We wanted a new beginning. This is a bad start. And I'm sure that the leader of the Liberal Democrats is already sending a letter to you, or it might be stuck in the computer somewhere. I'm not going to make that judgment call. Liz Saville-Roberts, point of order.
Ariane, has the Speaker received any notice of a statement from the government following the interception today by Israeli forces of more than 50 boats carrying aid for Gaza in international waters west of Cyprus? There are UK citizens on these vessels, including my constituent Chris Hill from Clottabont near Carnarvon. Could he advise me on how UK citizens' rights to provide humanitarian aid and the right to freedom of navigation in international waters can be guaranteed in this case, as well, of course, as their right to immediate and unimpeded access to British consular officials?
First of all, can I just say thank you, the Honourable Lady, for giving me notice of the point of order. As you would expect, I have received no notice of a statement on this matter, but the government front bench will have heard that the honourable member's concern. She is an experienced member and knows there are many opportunities for her to raise this matter on behalf of her constituents. If she requires further advice, she could consult with the clerks in the table office, but I certainly know this won't be the end of it. And who knows, accuse may be an option with no guarantees. Right, I will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
King's Speech, motion for an address, adjourned debate on question.
No. Be presented to His Majesty as on the order paper. I now call the Secretary of State, Peter Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard your call for decency and respect, and I hope that that will be the watchwords for the debate as it unfolds today. Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, is with her G7 colleagues today, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to open the King's Speech debate on backing British business to create economic growth. It is economic growth for a purpose, not simply to exceed the growth rate of other European members of the G7 achieved in the last year, not simply to have the highest growth rate in the G7, which we achieved in the last quarter, not simply to deliver on the government's primary mission, but for the purpose of achieving greater social justice for all. Economic growth is the surest path to having higher living standards, improved public services and better quality of life for people up and down our country. Mr. Speaker, we know that economic growth is the catalyst for new opportunities, the pathway to greater prosperity and the vehicle for greater equality and security for working people. That's why it matters so much. The growth figures published last week show that despite the many international headwinds, the UK economy grew by 0.6% in the last quarter, the fastest growth among G7 countries. So a silence over there. I would have thought the party that champions Britain and calls for economic growth would be celebrating economic growth when they see it. But no, silence, silence, silence. And it is much better than we inherited from that side, continuing to exceed the forecast of the doom and gloom mongers on the benches opposite, in the right-wing media, and even beating market expectations. In government, the party opposite and their strangely related first cousins Reform let down Britain's economic future. Now, in opposition, they talk down Britain's economic present. And you can bet your bottom dollar that they will do so again today, ignoring the facts. The facts are the UK experienced the highest GDP growth among European countries in the G7 last year. Just today, the IMF have upgraded the UK growth forecast, and the IMF forecasts that the UK is projected to have the fastest cumulative growth among European G7 economies over 2026 and 2027. None of this happened by accident, just like the damage done to the economy by the
GDP per capita is down? And can he tell me that a single one of his constituents, apart from those on welfare, feel better off under this government?
Well, the whole purpose of this debate is that economic growth matters. In the last full year that they were in office, economic growth, 0.4%. In the first full year of this government, 1.4%. 1.4%. Economic growth matters. That's the purpose of this debate. And she should be apologising for the state in which she left the economy for us to pick up the pieces. The growth has been driven by an activist, interventionist government that backs British business. By a government that isn't afraid to roll up its sleeves and make the big calls when big times demand. From Jaguar Land Rover in the West Midlands to Ineos in Scotland, Agratas in the South West, Tata Steel in Wales and Harland & Wolff across the United Kingdom. We step in to invest, modernise and protect British industry when necessary. We step back by reducing unnecessary regulation when possible, and we step up to modernise our critical national economic infrastructure where vital. Supporting the third runway in Heathrow, that party opposite curtailed. Expanding the Oxford-Cambridge corridor, the party opposite hesitated. Backing the Northern Powerhouse Rail, while the party opposite cancelled. This government has confirmed £45 billion of funding for Northern Powerhouse Rail to upgrade lines. East of the Pennines and along forward a brand new route connecting Liverpool and Manchester. I give way.
For giving away, and that was a great list, but something missing from that list was the oil and gas sector, specifically the £17 billion of investment that was lost by the government not scrapping the EPL, and the £50 billion of investment because of their ban on new licences and other hostile policies. Will you reflect on these and actually the damage that the government is doing to growth in the north east of Scotland, but also the UK as a whole?
This government has invested in industry up and down the country. From Agratas in the southwest, we're investing in gigafactories, to Ineos in Scotland. We are investing in the industries that are keeping our country going, and we have got growth into the economy. I give way.
The Secretary of State, he was kind enough to mention Harland & Wolff, and successive governments have put in place a number of support measures and ensured that that company can thrive itself. But in taking at face value what he has said, does he recognise that if this government continues to refuse to designate Project Euston as a defence project and opens it to international tender, then not only will they not support British business and yards like Harland & Wolff, but the project will be 3 years delayed. If he wants to inject business growth and economic growth, then he should designate it as a UK defence project and keep the work and the investment in the UK.
I'm grateful for his intervention. He knows full well the commitment that I personally have to Northern Ireland and its economic success. All of the issues relating to national resilience are things that we have to consider in this moment in time, unlike any other moment in time in peacetime. These are issues that I look at very closely. In the days and weeks ahead, I'll be talking a lot more about how we can support industry and business across Northern Ireland. I give way.
Speaker, first of all, can I commend the Secretary of State for what he's saying? And since he's a regular visitor to Northern Ireland, which I know he is, and he does it because he loves the country, and we appreciate that, and thank him very much. The Federation of Small Businesses highlights that over half of the enterprises trading between Great Britain and Northern Ireland face severe friction, with over a third halting trade entirely. So what can the Secretary of State do to explicitly outline how the proposed regulations for a growth bill can actually help? That's Federation of Small Businesses in Northern Ireland. He's committed to it. Let's hear what he's got to say. Thank you.
Yes, I'm aware of those issues from opposition into government. And of course, rebuilding the relationship with the EU is also partly about smoothing that barrier across the Irish Sea, and we'll continue to do so. Now, we're also building the critical national economic infrastructure that the party opposite consistently failed to deliver on runways, on reservoirs, and on railways. Just as we modernise Britain's critical national economic infrastructure, we are maximising Britain's industrial strength by delivering our modern industrial strategy. Written for business, with business, our strategy creates the right conditions for business to succeed. Since its publication, we have been tackling the high costs of energy. Our supercharger saves firms hundreds of millions of pounds every year. And our British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme will help over 10,000 eligible manufacturing businesses saving them £40 per megawatt hour from next April. I am very aware of the challenges that ceramics sector faces too. I am meeting with representatives of the sector tomorrow to discuss how government might be able to support the sector and hope to be able to say more about that very soon. To cut the red tape holding back British businesses back, we are ending mandatory strategic reports for medium-sized companies and ending directors' reports on businesses of all sizes, saving firms £230 million each and every year. We're stripping out unnecessary rules and regulations. Through the Regulation for Growth Bill, announced in the King's Speech, we will create regulatory sandboxes, economic growth laboratories, where the party opposite, with their destructive ideology of deliberate deindustrialisation, from monetarist Thatcherism to Brexit isolationism, drove British manufacturing businesses to the wall and destroyed the jobs that depend on them. This government is determined to maximise the UK's competitive advantage, not just through reindustrialisation, though that is necessary, but through new industrialisation, in advanced manufacturing, in clean energy, in artificial intelligence and new technology. That's why we've rolled out new AI growth zones and confirmed the site of the UK's first small modular reactor, a milestone on the journey to becoming a clean energy superpower. I give way.
The Minister for giving way, and he was talking about deregulation, but does he not accept that adding 330 pages worth of the Employment Rights Bill at a cost of £1 billion to the economy has having the opposite effect, and which is why the youth unemployment in my constituency has gone up by 28% in just 1 year?
I'm grateful that he's given me the opportunity to point out that in my department, the overall net regulatory burden is reducing, not expanding. And I will not stand here in front of the Tories and apologise for giving new rights to workers for the age that we are living in. They failed for an entire period in office of 14 years to make sure that people have the protections and the rights in work that are fit for the age that we are living in. We can move forward with growth in the economy that takes forward businesses and the people who work in businesses. That is to be celebrated, not condemned like the Tories. I give way.
Right Honourable Gentleman, and quite reasonably setting out the assertions around where he wants this government to go. But does he not see the irony? After all the events of last week, where the cost of borrowing is growing higher and higher than many of our competitors, and the instability that all business leaders say they feel, that his words today won't ring very true to those people who seriously wonder about the future direction of this government, with putative leadership contenders talking about fundamental changes in directions with different fiscal rules.
He mentions irony from the party that gave us the Liz Truss mini budget that wreaked havoc on our economy, that meant mortgages went up for every mortgage holder across the country, inflation peaking at 12%, and they talk about instability. This country still lives with the instability that they wreaked on our country. Now, a major expansion of Drive 35 is channeling investments into batteries, electric motors and power electronics, part of the biggest government investment in and protect. The watchwords for the new industrialisation of Britain, with our biggest industries, in our biggest sectors, and for our boldest companies. I give way.
Honourable friend for giving way. He talks about deregulation. We've seen where deregulation has led to in the finance sector, in the banking sector, in the water industry. Consumers end up paying the price. And he talked about AI. Stephen Hawking, speaking way back in 2014, cautioned us, and I quote, "The development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race." So why does this government believe that deregulating AI is going to assist with its growth mission instead and put consumer lives and the human race at risk?
It is this government that is investing in AI infrastructure, but also making sure the regulatory and legislative landscape is up to date for the time that we are living in. What he wants to do is turn the clock back AI is a technology that is awashing the world. We can't stop it coming to our country. We can shape how it interacts with our economy and its people. That's why we are investing in the training of 7.5 million people throughout the economy, 1 million students, to make sure we can seize the opportunities that AI presents, but make sure that we protect people from the damages that could be there. And not just are we creating the conditions for the new industrialisation, we are ambitious for the success of Britain's small businesses. Our programme, Backing Your Business Plan, is one of the most generous packages of support rolled out by any government. With new hospitality zones and reduced red tape for bars and cafes, we've brought in an £11 billion lending package to help small firms grow internationally, to take advantage of the trade agreements that we have negotiated with India, South Korea and the United States. And, Mr. Speaker, be warned this might trigger the other side, but we are going to deepen Britain's trading relationship with the European Union, Britain's most significant international marketplace. That's what our European Partnership Bill is all about. I think I give way.
And I absolutely welcome the deepening relationship with the EU and the measures on the late payments. But the elephant in the room is that while the jobs tax exists and the government hasn't made the most of the business rate changes in retail, hospitality and leisure, the benefit to small businesses is more than outweighed by the extra difficulties those small businesses are facing. Will the Minister accept that there does need to be changes on that front, even if we have to wait to the budget for it?
I'm grateful. Once again, the Lib Dems condemn every fundraising measure that we have brought in to invest in our public services in order to get our country back on its feet. But they never say how they will pay for the alternative, never say how they will raise the money themselves. So I'm not going to apologise for any of these measures, and I will come to the investment that we have made in small businesses and in hospitality in a moment, and I will give way with her again if she wants to at the time. But can she please just say what the alternative is from her perspective? Because the Lib Dems, they want to spend all the money in the world, but they don't want to tell people how it is. Now, the lending commitment that we have secured the UK's 5 lending banks will support Britain's small businesses to succeed and to prosper. Our business rate support packages worth £4.3 billion to protect ratepayers from seeing large overnight increases in bills. We've introduced permanently lower multipliers for retail, hospitality, leisure properties worth nearly £1 billion a year and benefiting over 750,000 properties. I know that many businesses, particularly in the hospitality sector and retail, would like us to go further. I get that. They are impacted by changes in the shopping and social habits of their customers, as well as the financial and geopolitical pressures in the wider economy. We are absolutely aware and attuned to that. But the crocodile tears from the party opposite about these industries is laughable and lamentable. They are the party that urged us to join the costly military action in the Gulf and that will heap further pressure on hospitality and other sectors throughout the economy. It is not our war, but the party opposite would make British businesses and consumers pay the price. I give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. He talks about crocodile tears. What would he say to the hospitality industries in my constituency who have been impacted by the national insurance contribution rise, the minimum wage rise and the business rates that he just talked so effusively about? What message would he give to them as they struggle to deal with the outcome of that budget?
Well, unfortunately, none of them were just listening to the words that I just said outlining the measures we are taking, but also the admittance that we get it and we are listening, but fundamentally and foundationally what they need is what every business in this country needs, a growing economy. The last year they were in office, 0.4%. The first year in office of this government, 1.4%. That's what every business needs across the country, and when it comes to specific sectors at specific moments in time, we are watching and we are attuned, and I am acting where necessary. Mr. Speaker, when the honourable gentleman opposite addresses the House on that and so much more, I am certain that he will display all of the symptoms of the economic illiteracy and ideological incompetence that for too long has engulfed the party opposite. By contrast, Mr Speaker, we are taking practical action to end these conditions. We are bringing in new measures to tackle late payments. The Small Business Protections Late Payments Bill will give the UK the strongest legal framework in the entire G7. Late payments cost the UK economy £11 billion a year, forcing the closure of 38 businesses every single day. And for 14 years, it was the same with them, and they did nothing. The bill tackles the scourge of late payments, brings in stronger powers for Small Business Commissioner, sets out strict maximum payment terms of 60 days, and bans the deduction of rentitions in construction contracts. The FSB has said that tackling late payments is one of the biggest things that government can do to help small businesses grow. That's the difference an activist, interventionist Labour government makes. Finally, let me turn to another example of that difference. The ghost of free market Thatcherism still haunts many of the industrial areas of this country. It can be seen in the scars of deindustrialisation still marking too many communities around our country. It is high time to exercise the ghost of deindustrialisation. When I published the steel strategy last month, I told this House I would never hesitate to fight for British industry in defence of the national interest. The legislation we are bringing forward is proof positive of that commitment. I give way to my honourable friend. Well,
Grateful to my right honourable friend. Sorry, forgive me, I shouldn't call him that. He'll be embarrassed. But I'm very grateful to the right honourable member for his point about the steel industry. Understandably, he's chosen to support one particular aspect of industry, the steel maker, and to the expense and to the cost of every other steel industry, the steel consumers. How is he going to balance that, and what provision is he going to put in for those who are going to see their steel prices rise because of his intervention?
I'm grateful for his intervention. I have committed to invest, to modernise and to protect where I need to the steel industry. These are watchwords that I apply throughout the economy in highly volatile times. Investing up to £2.5 billion to modernise and transform the steel sector from blast furnaces to electric arc furnaces. These are the kinds of transformations we need to do. Now, if I had invested that money but not also protected our sector, that would be pouring vast amounts of public money straight down the drain. In certain circumstances, I have had to step in and use measures to protect the domestic British industry. I am not putting measures on any products which are not manufactured in the UK. I'm doing so wisely. I'm doing so in order to protect and make sure we can build and retain a steel industry that is fit for the future and sustainable. These are the ways that we will move forward and make sure that in an era of global instability, we have the key aspects of our supply chain that we need for our resilience as a nation, yes in defence, yes in industry, and yes in all of the money we are investing in infrastructure, and we must reserve that capabilities. I am listening and engaging with all parts of the steel sector and those manufacturers and those businesses which depend on it. I'm listening closely to them. If there are any impacts, then of course I will be engaging with them to understand it and see how it will be possible, where necessary, to support. No, I'm going to carry on, but thank you very much. I appreciate the kind offer to come in again and again, but I look forward to all of your speeches, their speeches. The steel industry nationalisation bill will give us the authority to bring British steel into public ownership, not as an ideological exercise, but as a practical means of safeguarding the national interest. It will allow us to retain the Scunthorpe plant as a critical piece of our national infrastructure, one that is essential to British economic resilience. Britain has long been a proud steel-making nation. Whatever I have to do to make it so, Britain will retain its capacity and capability to manufacture steel. This is my commitment to honourable members in this House and to the remaining steel communities of our country. The strength of that commitment can be measured in our determination to boost domestic steel production to ensure that 50% of our steel used here is made here. Mr. Speaker, Britain cannot make its way in the world as a services-only economy. We have to make our way, earn our way to greater prosperity, equality, security and opportunity. We can't do that by economic isolationism. We can't do it by neoliberalism, greater protectionism, nor a command economy. We cannot regulate our way to prosperity. We can only achieve it through practical and pragmatic policies that support British businesses to be profitable, to scale up, to create jobs and to grow. We have to end the outdated free market ideologies, failed economic theories and siren voices that all but destroyed Britain's manufacturing base and drove the British public towards Brexit. Britain's future prosperity can only be built by business success. There is no other way, no shortcut, no easy option, no magic bullet. No matter how attractive and simplistic slogans and superficial soundbites may appear to some, I give way.
Secretary of State for giving way. He's making a wonderful speech about the 1980s. Whilst I agree with him on many of the points he's making, the truth today is this country's come a long way in all sorts of sectors, and I'm proud to have done my bit on it. I want to ask about regulation. He, I know, agrees with me that actually leadership in regulating the new industries, sandboxes, test beds, is a great UK strength. He also wants us to get closer to the European market. Is he worried that in doing that, we may end up losing the competitive advantage, say, in agri-tech, in gene editing, in a number of areas where we could genuinely attract investment to new industries?
I'm grateful, but just to clarify, I'm talking about how we recover still from the scars of the 1980s, learn the lessons of it and make sure that we never repeat it so that the scarring endures for generations to come again. I addressed the answer directly as if I wouldn't, as a courtesy to the honourable gentleman. Where we align, we'll do so in the national interest and in the national interest alone. Nor can we turn back the clock to build future success. The partnerships this government has built with businesses, local government and trade unions is delivering resilient growth and helping build a stronger economy, a fairer country with wages up and public borrowing down, with six interest rate cuts and 500,000 children being lifted out of poverty, with the FTSE 100 reaching historic highs and the UK raising more venture capital funding this year than France, Germany and the Netherlands combined. This government faced enormous challenges on taking office, and the conflict in the Gulf presents us with even greater challenges in the future. Despite that, we are making progress. We know that it will take time for the benefits of progress to be felt sufficiently and seen sufficiently and properly felt. The recent election results, they show that. The only sure route to proving that the benefits of change is by growing the economy. And the only certain way to grow the economy is through British business success. Our task is to create the right conditions for Britain's businesses to invest, to succeed, and to win in an increasingly competitive global marketplace. We have made the start, and we will see it through to finish. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sir Melstride, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This King's speech is an empty vessel, which is a surprise because only last week, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was telling anybody who cared to listen that the government would be leaning into economic growth in a more radical way, eschewing managerial incrementalism. And yet we have heard nothing other than that, at best, from the Right Honourable Lady just now. Of course. Gentleman just now.
Easy mistake to make.
If only the Chancellor were here, Mr. Speaker, I'd be right about everything. But it was also, of course, the Prime Minister who said, that Labour would now tread more lightly on our lives. Well, we've seen what that has meant in the last few weeks. It was also said by the Chancellor that, of course, it would all be growth, growth, growth. And whilst the Right Honourable Gentleman trots out and trumpets the latest uplift in the forecast, very modest uplift of the IMF, he neglects to mention that they were actually forecasting back in January 1.3%, not the 1% today. He neglects to mention that that increase in the first quarter of this year is on the back of a risible growth performance in Q4 of last year, exacerbated, according to the OBR and the Bank of England, by the fact that his party and his Chancellor flew every single possible tax rise going and had a material impact on depressing the economy. So some of this growth is simply a bounce back from the mistakes that were made at the end of last year. He refused to answer, I will momentarily, he refused to answer the question from my honourable friend as to what had happened to per capita GDP. So let me tell him, it has been utterly anaemic throughout this government's period in office. And also he failed to mention, Mr Speaker, that in the notes to the IMF's comments on upgrading the growth forecast for this year, they point to domestic uncertainty possibly weighing down on consumer spending and investment decisions. I wonder what they could possibly be referring to, Mr Speaker, when they talk about domestic uncertainty. And as to our record, I need to remind him that on the day of the general election, we had inflation bang on target at 2%. It's now 50% more than that. We had the fastest growth in the G7. We had employment at near record levels. We had near record low levels of unemployment. And we had 13 consecutive months of real wage growth. And I give way to the gentleman at the back.
I thank the Shadow Chancellor for giving way. On the subject of mistakes made and growth, does he accept that the Brexit that he left us and his party left us has knocked between 4 and 8% off our GDP?
Well, as I will come on to argue, Mr Speaker, our problems actually rest a little bit close to union. This party promised stability. They also, and please try not to laugh too loudly, said that they would create the most pro-business government in the history of our country. None of that, Mr Speaker, none of that has come to pass. In fact, it's not just the Prime Minister that is the problem. Whoever goes on to lead the Labour Party, if this Prime Minister is replaced, will not do any better. And the reason is this, that the party opposite had no plan as to how to improve our economy. They had no plan at all. They had a plan to win an election, which is to keep your profile as low as you can, to hold the Ming vase and tiptoe across the shiny floor towards that loveless landslide. But they had no plan for the people of our country. And they are in hock to their own backbenchers, Mr Speaker. We know that every time they try and do something that requires some backbone, they are stopped by their backbenchers. And Mr Speaker, the record of this government is appalling, not just on growth. Unemployment. I notice the right honourable gentleman did not mention unemployment once, and he certainly didn't mention youth unemployment, because the record is appalling. The highest unemployment in 5 years under this government. Youth unemployment nudging up towards 20%. Under the last Labour government, I will in a moment, under the last Labour government, Mr Speaker, youth unemployment increased by over 40%. Under the last Conservative government, it reduced by over 40%, and I give way to the honourable.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. Isn't it shameful that the government is now having to subsidise employers in taking on young people, when in fact it's the government's very actions in imposing higher national insurance charges, higher minimum wage, higher burden in the Employment Rights Act that have caused the problem in the first place?
The honourable friend is entirely right. It's like trying to apply the accelerator whilst having the brake on full tilt. That is what this government is doing, the total illogicality of the approach that they are taking. And when it comes to inflation, inflation is up compared to where it was under us. It's about the highest in the G7. It certainly was last year. And as we lean into the challenges of oil price and gas price spikes, that is a weak position to be in, and most economists will make that point. When it comes to borrowing, Mr Speaker, the party opposite has borrowed a full £250 billion more across this Parliament compared to the plans that they inherited. No wonder that our borrowing costs are the highest in the G7. They are higher than Greece. They are higher even than Morocco. And why has this happened, Mr Speaker? We know why it's happened, because it's what socialists do. What socialists do is they believe that you can tax your way to prosperity. I tell the right honourable gentleman, you cannot. The £25 billion of additional tax on businesses, national insurance increases, has crucified business in this country. It has fallen predominantly, I will in a moment, it has fallen predominantly on young people, because it was not just an increase in the rate, it was a reduction of the threshold at which that tax cuts in. And that means that young people have borne the brunt of that tax increase. And the sectors that rely predominantly on first-time jobbers, young workers, part-time workers, female workers, have been crucified in turn. And that includes the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, where over 100,000 jobs have been destroyed by this government. I give way to the...
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. And in Bognor Regis and Littlehampton, I opened the new Premier Inn on Friday this week, a project that was passed under the last Conservative government. But in my constituency, many businesses are failing because of the increased costs and regulation. But the right honourable friend to me agree that this is an absolute travesty for our country.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I've had great pleasure in visiting her constituency in the past to speak to businesses, and it's exactly what they complain of. The government has taken no efforts to get on top, in this King's Speech, of the benefits bill. There is a reference to it and the Timms review. And what we know with the Timms review on personal independence payments, Mr. Speaker, is within its terms of reference is an explicit statement that this is not about controlling the welfare bill. There will be no savings as a consequence of the Timms review. That is not good enough. We have got to be about getting people off benefits and back into work. I'll give way.
Does my honourable friend not agree that we're seeing not only the letting down of young people, but actually a deeply immoral act of keeping people on welfare, when we know that in 5 or 10 years' time, when they've been on welfare for so long that they won't have any options, they will be left effectively slaves of a state that has no concern for them, and nobody in this chamber today will have any power over how the welfare state will behave then. But they will have no options, and it will be this House's fault and that government's fault for having kept them there and imprisoned them.
That is entirely right. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we know that work matters. We know that it matters to get people off benefits. We know that people's mental health is improved by people going to work, having that social interaction, that routine, that sense of pride and self-worth that comes with work. And that is why the unemployment levels and the failure of this government to tackle benefits.
The Shadow Minister for giving way. I actually used to work in the employment service. And under Thatcher, she was encouraging us to take people off of signing on and sign them on the sick. You created a whole generation of people on the sick just to manipulate the numbers. How do you like those apples?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think all these flashbacks to the 1980s are a slightly desperate attempt to get away from the 2020s, I think. The other thing that socialists love to do, I will in a moment, I'll make some progress, that socialists love to do, Mr. Speaker, is they love to borrow and borrow and borrow and spend and spend and spend until they run out of other people's money. And that is precisely what this government has done. When it comes to fiscal rules that the right honourable gentleman mentioned, of course he failed to mention that this Chancellor, in the run-up to the election, said she would abide by our fiscal rules. She promptly changed them so that she could borrow more, flipping from public sector net debt as a definition of debt to public sector financial liabilities. It allowed her to take the brake off and to borrow and spend even more as a consequence. I give way.
I'm flashing back to the 1980s. And would the right honourable member like to remind us when the Conservatives last balanced a budget?
The current account went into a slight surplus just around 2015. 16, around that sort of level. The current account did, actually, and that was on the back of inheriting a £160 billion deficit from the party opposite in 2010, running at over 10% of GDP. Another example of the disasters of a Labour government in action. And the right honourable gentleman earlier spoke of artificial intelligence and the opportunities, and he's quite right to do that. He's quite right to do that. But what we know of artificial intelligence in the labour market is it will have a profound effect on the labour market and a very uncertain effect. And what we know is that we need a flexible skills off to deal with that, and we need flexible labour markets. But what this government is doing through the Employment Rights Bill is making the labour market more rigid, and that is going to hurt particularly younger people who do not have a track record in employment. So do not be surprised if youth unemployment continues to hover around 16–17% as a consequence of the actions of this government. Now, of course, we know that when it comes to leaning into these challenges, there's no plan. This government's not going to do anything. It's just involved in internecine introspection, a civil war now within the Labour Party. They said that they would tread lightly on our lives. In fact, they're now stampeding all over them. And the rivals to the Prime Minister now are going to be looking to double down on the very policies that I have just set out, these ruinous policies. We've seen the real effects of this in recent days. On Friday, when the honourable member for Makerfield said that he would step down in order to ease the passage of Andy Burnham to this place, what happened to gilt yields on that day? They spiked up 18 basis points. Now, I've done a little bit of research, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you that if sustained through the forecast period, that would mean over £5 billion of additional debt servicing costs. That's about £300 for every working family in this country. That's the effect of Andy Burnham, and he hasn't even arrived here yet. We are on the edge of a precipice economically, leaning into a very turbulent time. These are the policies of the madhouse, and yet we're told not to worry. The honourable member for Liverpool Wavertree, who I believe is an outrider for Andy Burnham, said of the bond markets that they would just have to, and I quote, fall in line. The bond markets will just have to fall in line. Andy Burnham himself said in the New Statesman, and I quote, we've got to get beyond this thing. I will in a moment, we've got to get...
Just point of order, Paul.
Speaker, my understanding is if an honourable member is mentioning another honourable member in the chamber, they are supposed to give advance notice. I've received no such notice.
That's not the case. The case is, if the member's not here, they should have informed them, as you sat there, quite rightly. And what I would say is, I'm sure that the Shadow Chancellor is ready to give way immediately. Mr Belstride.
Right, always ready to give way, Mr. Speaker, and to take your direction. Andy, yes, if you'd like to. Well, the honourable lady was still seated. I wasn't sure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Shadow Minister for giving way. I agree that that might not have been the most eloquent of answers. However, what I would say is that people in this country are fed up of bond markets dabbling in the democracy of our country.
I think, Mr. Speaker, that's a rather unfortunate example of doubling down or continuing to dig, if I might say so. But the honourable lady's comments, well, I think, sort of pale when it comes to Andy Burnham's comments in the New Statesman, when he said of the bond markets, and I quote, we've got to get beyond this thing of being in hock to the bond markets. He also suggested that defence spending should lie outside the fiscal rules, as if spending and borrowing to defend our country is a different form of borrowing than any other borrowing this government might entertain. He's not so much the King of the North, he's more like King Canute, sitting in his chair on the sand, dressed in his football kit, trying to push back the tide of the bond markets, saying things like, you've got to fall in line. It's ludicrous as the waters lap up around his ankles and we all ultimately will get swept away. In the King's speech, Mr. Speaker, we had a holiday tax that's going to clobber the cost of holidays for the most budget holidays in this country, for people that have saved up hard, just want to have some memories with their children. We've also got the nationalisation of steel, which seems to me to just be some kind of political sop to the left on the Labour benches. We've got oil and gas. They're going to put a stop to new exploration as a result of this bill. This is lunacy when we are importing gas from Norway, extracting it from the same basin. We are also importing liquid natural gas, formerly from Qatar, now predominantly from the United States, which has 4 times the carbon footprint compared to if we had extracted it ourselves using our own resources. All that energy security blown, all those jobs destroyed, all that tax revenue foregone simply because of the ideological madness of the party opposite. And I give way to the honourable.
I thank the Shadow Chancellor for giving way, and he's completely right to reflect on the plight of the oil and gas sector under this Labour government. But on jobs, 1,000 jobs being lost a month, every single month in the oil and gas sector, affecting constituents of all of ours, not just those in the North East of Scotland. Does the Shadow Chancellor share my dismay that a Labour government does not take that more seriously?
I do indeed. I have been up to Aberdeen. I have met with the honourable lady, with my honourable friend, and I have heard firsthand about the effect that this is having economically. It is utterly madness. And if we have an opportunity in government, we will put that right. I've already mentioned benefits. Nothing about welfare of any substance in this bill. Nothing about the Defence Investment Plan. Where is the Defence Investment Plan? It was promised back in September. And then we have the Regulating for Growth bill. An oxymoron, if ever there was one. Regulating for Growth speaks to the heart of all you need to know about this Labour government. They know nothing about the economy, nothing about job creation, nothing about businesses. Yep, briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Shadow Minister for what he's saying? Does the Shadow Minister share my concerns and the concerns of probably many in this House that when it comes to small and medium businesses in particular, they will suffer more than most? In Northern Ireland, I think the figures are between 85 and 89% of the job creators in Northern Ireland are small businesses. So what Northern Ireland needs is something special from this government. Does he see something special coming? Or are we just wondering what's going to happen?
No, what I see coming, I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, is what's already baked in, which is business rates going up through the roof. In some cases, small businesses in our high streets facing 140% increases in the amount that they're having to pay by way of business rates. This side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we believe in enterprise. We believe in opportunity, we believe in aspiration, we believe in markets, we believe in risk takers, we believe in people that work hard, people that get up in the morning early and do the right thing, go out and create wealth, create jobs and grow our economy. And because of that, we set out at our last conference £47 billion worth of savings, including predominantly on the welfare budget, £23 billion. And with that, you can do 2 wonderful things. One is you can start to bear down on the deficit and get on top of that debt, which is out of control under this government. But secondly, you can get taxes down, particularly on the productive parts of the economy. So we announced the abolition of stamp duty and a tax cut for young people. And there's more in our alternative King's Speech. A bill to back our high streets, to cut business rates for 250,000 of our high street businesses, a Get Britain Working bill to reverse the damage done by the Employment Rights Act, a reducing bureaucracy bill to remove the mountain of environmental, social and governance regulations, a Save British Industry bill to get rid of the Climate Change Act and to abolish the ZEV mandate, a cheap energy bill to get rid of renewable subsidies and bring down bills for households and businesses, a Get Britain Drilling bill to reinvigorate our North Sea oil and gas industry, creating jobs and boosting our exports, and a welfare reform bill to get the benefits bill under control and to restore the 2-child cap. That is the serious plan that our economy needs. That is the plan to back our businesses and to deliver growth. That is a Conservative plan for a better Britain.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Chair of the Transport Committee, my remarks on the gracious speech will mainly focus on transport, and if time, I plan to touch on some of the other measures where the government's proposed legislation will benefit many of my constituents directly. Mr. Speaker, this debate is entitled Backing Business to Create Economic Growth. Our transport system is key to growth. Economic growth is central to the ambition of the £45 billion investment to deliver Northern Powerhouse Rail. It will start to address the 10% productivity gap between Northern England and the UK average. Residents and businesses in the north endure longer and often unreliable journeys compared to international comparators. For instance, only 38% of residents can access the city centre of Leeds within 30 minutes by public transport, compared to 87% in Marseille, a similar-sized city. With the new rail infrastructure proposed from Liverpool to hold the whole of the economy across the north of England will benefit from Northern Powerhouse Rail. I now move on to the Highways Financing Bill, which will introduce a new funding model for road infrastructure by introducing a regulated asset base, or RAB, funding model to unlock private capital investment in road infrastructure, with the Lower Thames Crossing to be the first road scheme to use this model. And whilst the government points out that the RAB model has been successfully used in sectors like energy and aviation, I'm also aware, such as from Heathrow, those paying the bills, in that case the airlines, say that capital costs can be excessive and poor value for money. But then it seems natural that as the Lower Thames Crossing will be a whole new road, it could be funded by tolls, as the Severn Bridge was, and is the norm for motorways in many similar economies. But what plans for the future? Is the government considering implementing tolls on projects to improve and repair current highway infrastructure? And surely the government isn't seriously considering building new roads, significant new capacity. Otherwise, we could be going back to the 70s with predict and provide, creating more road capacity, which in a system of infinite demand just continues to deliver congestion while eating up more and more of our present land. And I would like the Minister today or subsequently to just explain more of the role of the Office of Road and Rail in the context of the regulatory role mentioned in the government briefing. I now move on to the Civil Aviation Bill, which will deliver consumer enforcement powers to the Civil Aviation Authority and allow for timely regulatory intervention to improve aviation safety, modernise UK airspace and provide for a revised slot allocation system to deal with unplanned disruptions. I welcome the additional consumer enforcement powers proposed, including compensation rules when airlines damage mobility aids. This must be very welcome for disabled passengers whose mobility is dependent on high-powered wheelchairs, for instance, and the current compensation is wholly inadequate. However, His Majesty the King announced that the bill will be introduced to unlock the benefits of airport expansion. I'm not quite sure I quite see the direct link between that statement and the subsequent deal and detail that I've just covered. Moving on, Mr. Speaker, the overnight visitor levy brings UK tourist destinations into line with many places I and I'm sure others in this House have visited in other countries. It will enable local areas to invest in their transport infrastructure and other facilities that benefit both visitors and residents alike, whether it's shuttle buses to reduce the traffic jams on country lanes or improving facilities at busy stations. The draft taxi and private hire vehicle bill is also very welcome. The proposed bill addresses almost all the issues witnesses raised in our recent inquiry into taxis and private hire licensing, giving regulators... I certainly will.
Can I thank the Honourable Member for giving way? In specific in relation to private hire drivers, we have some 300,000 private hire drivers up and down this country. Uber has been incrementally increasing their fees whilst the drivers have been getting a fairly stagnant increase in their pay. We've just learned that Uber will be introducing driverless vehicles which would impact 300,000 workers. Does the Honourable Member agree that there needs to be some sort of action to prevent that from happening?
The honourable member is absolutely right, and I'm well aware of the concerns of drivers up and down the country, not of improved licensing, such as the government is talking about, they welcome that, but of some of these other threats existing under Uber's processes at the moment, but also the fear of the impact of autonomous vehicles. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable lady for taking intervention. She will know my passion when it comes to taxis and taxi licensing. Would she agree with me it's really important we deal with this licensing loophole to ensure that we don't have taxis that are licensed in other local authorities acting in our authority? And that doesn't just affect the drivers themselves, but also is a safety concern for passengers.
I very much welcome the work of the Minister for Roads and the work she's done on the proposed changes. So, if I just find my place, I welcome the commitment to replace a patchwork of outdated rules with a single, consistent framework, which will go a long way to address the out-of-area operations and problems that the honourable member has outlined. It will fix a system that has too often failed passengers and drivers. Baroness Casey's national audit on group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse found that the inconsistent taxi and private hire vehicle licensing creates vulnerabilities that can and was exploited by grooming gangs. The announcement of this legislation follows from the welcome commitment in the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Act to introduce minimum standards on drivers, operators and licensing authorities. But many fear that minimum standards could perpetuate inconsistencies that protect vulnerable passengers. They're seeking not minimum, but absolute standards in taxi licensing. Now, I just want to touch on something not directly connected to transport, and that's the draft ticket tout bill. And while I welcome a bill to stop ticket touts selling on concert and event tickets for vastly inflated prices, I wonder if it could be extended to apply to car driving test slots sold by the DVSA. Or will we have to wait until the agency updates its IT systems? Or actually, possibly, and perhaps successfully, manages to recruit and retain sufficient driving instructors so there's no longer more demand for tests than slots available, which is fueling the ticket touts. If the Evises have managed to stop the ticket touts making a killing on Glastonbury tickets, surely a government agency should have been able to do so before now. On the railways, the rollover Railways and Passenger Benefits Bill, establishing Great British Railways as a new publicly owned company and setting up a new passenger watchdog that will set consumer standards for railways and investigate poor service, as well as simplifying fares and ticketing. A passenger-focused GBR could, not necessarily will, but could improve reliability, simplicity and accountability across the network for passengers and for freight. And I'm moving away from transport now, Mr. Speaker. Other bills mentioned in the King's speech and the government's subsequent briefing are very welcome to many of my constituents. The Social Housing Renewal Bill will benefit the many constituents who will never be in a position to buy a home in West London. They just need a safe, secure, affordable and stable place they can call home without being overcrowded or having to keep on being forced to up sticks, lose their jobs and their support networks and disrupt their children's education to find themselves in another overpriced, overcrowded, damp, tiny space with shared facilities. I also welcome that young people aged 16 and 17 will be able to vote, as they have been in Scotland for a decade. And as someone who voted in here 9 years ago to remain in the single market and the customs union, I also welcome proposals to bring the UK closer to Europe, our exit from which has been one of the most devastating shocks to the UK economy. Many parents and teachers in my constituency welcome the consultation to reform SEND, although they are keeping a watching brief on whether the resources their children need will be adequate. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Common Hold and Leasehold Reform Bill. Whilst it would be virtually impossible to scrap leasehold entirely overnight, the ban on new leaseholds for flats, the cap on ground rents and the new process for converting to common hold are all very, very welcome, as will making it cheaper and easier for leaseholders to extend their lease or buy their freehold. And I also welcome the remediation bill for those living in homes with unsafe cladding. Too many residents in Hounslow, Isleworth and Brentford are still living in fear of the consequence of a fire breaking out in their block.
Daisy. Dave. Spokesperson for Liberal Democrats, Daisy.
Madam Deputy Speaker. For too many people, the promise that hard work would help them get on in life is broken. The promise that each generation would do better than the last is broken. And the expectation that big corporations will be made to play by the rules and pay fair taxes like the rest of us is broken. So it's hardly surprising that so many people feel that the whole system is broken, that nothing works, and that they are now demanding action to fix it. The King's Speech was another chance for this government to be bold, to tell us what it stands for and why. But sadly, it failed. On Europe, ministers once again talk about pursuing a closer partnership through gradual regulatory alignment. But if the government is serious about repairing the damage caused by Brexit, it must go further and faster. Brexit has left us poorer and more isolated in what is now a more dangerous and volatile world. At home, we must build real sovereignty in energy and food independence, but our economic and national security will only come from a much deeper relationship with our closest neighbours in Europe. The tax revenue lost every year due to Brexit has been estimated to now reach £90 billion a year. That is 3 mini-budgets in a year. We Liberal Democrats have a roadmap to rebuild our relationship with the EU and to reach full membership again, starting now with a customs union to cut red tape, to support exporters, to strengthen supply chains and grow our economy. Going for growth with Europe would end the cost of living crisis. And at a time when businesses are crying out for certainty, when our economy desperately needs a shot in the arm, when families and businesses are paralysed with a never-ending cost of living crisis, the government's approach is too timid when what is needed is bold action. On the late payments bill, small businesses are the backbone of our local economies, in my St Albans constituency and across the country. But they were offered little more than a bill aimed at tackling late payments. Now, this bill is welcome, but it barely scratches the surface of the challenges facing businesses every single day. Businesses are asking, where is the action on soaring energy costs? Where is the relief from the government's damaging jobs tax? Where is the meaningful reform of business rates? New Liberal Democrat analysis reveals that 40,000 businesses are still waiting on decisions to appeal their business rates evaluations from 2023, with average waits now hitting nearly a year. And when those cases are finally heard, more than half are overturned. Business owners just want to get on with running their businesses. Instead, they're being stuck in a slow, broken, expensive, impenetrable business rates system. The Conservatives promised reform in 2015. Labour promised it at the last election. But after a decade of inaction, businesses are still paying the price. In my own constituency of St Albans, 11 pubs now have rateable values of more than £100,000 because of the revaluation, even though they can't all be considered large business premises. One of those, the Beach House, is on our main high street, St Peter's Street. They saw their rateable value soar from £97,000 to £125,000, and just last week they took the decision to shut up shop for the final time. Hotels have been particularly hard hit as well. The Samuel Ryder Hotel in St Albans told me in January they will see their bill increase by 157% this year. And play centres have been penalised too. DJ's Play Jungle, a soft play centre, has been frozen out of the 15% U-turn discount offered to pubs and music venues. Many play centres will see their rates bills quadruple over the next few years. And what will be the result? Children will be priced out of indoor play. The government is introducing a competition reform bill, a regulating for growth bill and an enhancing financial services bill. Taken together, these bills are aimed at improving regulation. Now, as Liberals, we recognise that regulation has an important role to play.
We believe that good regulation can be a win-win-win, protecting consumers, promoting innovation and competition, and delivering on economic growth. But regulation only works when it is effective, proportionate, and responsive. Too often, compliance costs are high, regulation is focused on process, not outcome, and our regulators are far too slow, lagging far behind the industries they are supposed to oversee. This is especially true in financial services and fintech, where companies can spend months waiting for approvals and authorisations while investment dries up and opportunities disappear. For startups operating on tight funding runways, those delays can be devastating. So if the government is serious about growth, then it must ensure our regulatory system is agile, modern and capable of keeping pace with innovation, and it must deliver competition and growth without abandoning consumers. And at a time when financial cooperation with Europe is more important than ever, it is deeply disappointing that the stronger UK-EU financial services cooperation appears to have been overlooked in the government's so-called reset agenda. On the electricity generator levy bill, we Liberal Democrats welcome the principle behind this bill. It is right that the excess profits of electricity generators are taxed fairly, and it is right to break the outdated link between electricity prices and wholesale gas prices. And we Liberal Democrats were the only party at the last election to commit to that decoupling. But the government must go further. The revenues raised should tackle the cost of living crisis head-on. An emergency home insulation programme for low-income households, an energy security bank, action on heating oil and fuel costs, and stronger protections for small businesses struggling with energy bills. Finally, let me turn to the overnight visitor levy bill. In principle, Liberal Democrats support devolving more economic powers to local areas. Different communities face different challenges, and local leaders are often best placed to decide whether a visitor levy is appropriate for their area. But there is real concern that the government will use this levy not as an additional source of local investment to boost tourism, but as a mechanism to quietly offset future cuts to local government funding. We have seen this approach before. The government has already relied on council tax rises to compensate for reductions in central support to local authorities. So can I ask whether ministers will make it absolutely clear today on the record that any revenue raised through a visitor levy will genuinely be additional funding for local communities, tourism infrastructure and public services? It will not be a way for central government to sneakily offset future cuts to local government funding. And if the government does hand new powers to mayors in this area, then it must also go hand in glove with extra support for tourism and hospitality sector properly, by exempting hospitality from the jobs tax, considering lower rates for part-time staff, introducing a temporary cut to VAT for the sector, and launching a serious strategy to promote Britain's tourism industries overseas. To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Labour leadership hopefuls say they want a battle of ideas, not personalities. Well, we Liberal Democrats are fizzing with ideas. We have the ideas to fix our broken social care system. We have the ideas to fix our broken social care system, ignored by this government for 18 months. We have the roadmap to fix our broken relationship with Europe. We have the plan to fix our broken voting system, something which Labour hopefuls said they would fix and now say they won't. We have the ideas to save our high streets, to fix the broken business rate system, the broken energy market, to tackle the cost of living, and to unleash everything this great country has to offer. So I genuinely hope, that Labour leadership contenders are listening, because for our country's sake, I flippin' well hope they can match our level of ambition.
Justin Maggers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So it's undeniable in the face of the local election results last week that what we've done so far is not enough, that the long tail of austerity means we have so much more to do. People see a world moving at a rate of knots and are frustrated with what this is, a government's slow pace of change. We now live in a world where you can order almost anything you want in the morning for it to be delivered later that same day. For consumers, satisfaction now is almost instantaneous, but this is complete contrast to government where improvements are seen as slow. The expectations and the challenges that we face are there for all to see. So, what does the King's Speech do to address some of the things that I consider to be my holy trinity of what a good Labour government does, which is jobs, homes and health. Well, first of all, on homes, there are two pieces of legislation. The Social Housing Renewal Bill will alter the right to buy, increasing the eligibility requirement by 10 years, amending the percentage discounts to better align with new maximum discounts and exempt newly built social housing from the right to buy for 35 years. Like so many other Thatcher legacies, the sugar rush felt in the short term for those able to buy their home at a substantial discount has long been replaced by a broken social housing market where people living in identical properties next to each other can pay massively different rents, where the taxpayer often subsidises those inflated rents through housing benefit, and where millions of young people who might once have seen a council home as their natural route into adulthood have this option forever denied to them. And we can see where the logic of right to buy takes you. Between April 2012 and March 2025, 133,000 social homes were sold, but only 51,000 were replaced. And with 1.3 million people on council house waiting lists, the problem is obvious for us all to see. And secondly, on housing, the long-awaited draft Leasehold and Commonhold Reform Bill will bring us closer to ending the feudal leasehold system. It will finally ban the use of leasehold on new build flats, it will place a cap on ground rents, and it will create a new legal framework for Commonhold. The demand for this to be done as soon as possible is of course huge, and I know the Minister is going as fast as he safely can, but he also needs to tackle rip-off estate management fees. He's got to stop that model in its tracks, and if we are determined to tackle the cost of living crisis, that is one obvious and indefensible practice that we can end. Alongside addressing the problems that people face now, the government must also take steps to address the problems that are coming down the track. I believe that the unwritten social contract that if you work hard and play by the rules that you can expect in return a good standard of living is disintegrating and under real threat. Economic growth no longer translates across this country to better outcomes in life. This is only set to continue with the increase in AI in the workplace and developments in automation. Graduate roles have already been hit with a fall of more than 1/3 of graduate vacancies this year. This trend will only continue and diffuse across other areas of the labour market. Young people are therefore growing up and entering a world of work which is detached from the previous norms, and we are nowhere near ready for the changes that will be seen as a result of this in the next decade. The state needs to be ready to respond to these shifts to ensure that not only those entering the workforce but those already in it and displaced are able to be properly skilled for the needs of the future labour market. And I've no doubt that our future labour market has got to include significantly more manufacturing roles, and I'm pleased to hear I think the Secretary of State acknowledged that when he spoke today. The more we can make ourselves, the more insulated we will be from the inevitable disruption that AI is going to cause jobs, particularly in the service sector. But it will also better protect us from the global supply chain shocks that we are far too exposed to at the moment. The moves to protect UK steel are, I think, the right step, the first step to recognising that we need to do much, much more to protect our manufacturing base. I'm not proposing we nationalise everything. I think I'll leave that for other people to do. But my visit to the local Vauxhall car plant last week was a clear lesson in how we need to sharpen up across the whole of government to protect manufacturing and the UK automotive sector in particular. The decision in the last budget on ECOS was welcomed, as is support for energy costs next year. But of course, as you would expect, they would like that to be much sooner and much stronger than what is proposed. There are a number of factors challenging the automotive sector, but the biggest one, and the one that actually the government has the most control over, is the Z mandate. There has been huge investment in the Ellesmere Port plant so it can manufacture electric vehicles, and I believe that most of the UK automotive sector is supportive of an electric future. But the reality is that the level of sales now are nowhere near where they need to be to hit the Z mandate. And of course that gap is only going to get bigger each year. And we need to be clear that this isn't just a case of, oh well, we aren't going to hit the target. Every sale short of that target has direct financial consequences for UK manufacturers. And we need to look around the world. Most countries have put in place electric vehicle sales targets, but have had to row back from them
in light of the evidence that uptake just isn't where it was predicted to be. So we need to bring that review forward, make that decision now that the escalation of targets under the Z mandate needs to be turned off. This isn't something to be looked at in the abstract corridors of Whitehall on a graph. It's something that needs to be looked at in the cold reality of consumer choice and of the importance of protecting UK manufacturing. Let us not lose good manufacturing jobs in pursuit of the unobtainable. All that will we do in those circumstances is supercharge the Chinese automotive sector. That isn't going to help the planet as much as we'd like, and it certainly isn't going to help this country. We have a great tradition of building vehicles in this country, and we want to be at the vanguard of taking the industry into the future. But let's do it in a sustainable way that protects and builds on what we have. And we need to do more to support UK manufacturing through procurement. I was delighted to take recently one of the Royal Mail delivery vans for a spin, as that had been made, with permission of the owner, I should that was made in Ellesmere Airport, an electric van made down the road, delivering mail to my constituents. We need to see much more of that. We need to encourage UK companies to buy from the UK. Every part of the public sector should be required to buy British. Every council, every hospital, every school should seek to maximise that, because every taxpayer pound that is spent on UK goods goes back into our economy. We can do a lot without legislating, but we absolutely need to pursue that with a great amount of zeal. And this is all about levelling the playing field as well, because more needs to be done. Because when people see barbers shops and vape shops proliferate on their high streets, they know that something isn't right, as there simply isn't the market to sustain them all. And when they see some shut down, perhaps they're selling illicit goods or illegal working, it confirms their suspicions that they are not competing with legitimate businesses. And when we see them reopen a few months later, perhaps under a different name, they see a system struggling to cope with the scale of organised crime that is infecting our high streets. And yes, there is going to be a doubling of time for which a shop can be closed for breaching the law. But let's go after the landlords too, for at best failing to do due diligence, and at worst for being complicit in illegal activity. So we can do more to support our small businesses on the high street and actually get a level playing field that we desperately need. We need that as well in the way we treat people at work. We have to accept that bogus self-employment is a business model that is based on denying workers basic protections at work, and is absolutely the wrong direction for this country to go in. So we promised that we would tackle this on our manifesto, so we should get on with it. On an unrelated note, the proposed strengthening of the growth duty, which will apparently reduce unnecessary risk aversion, is misguided. Good businesses want their staff to work in safe environments. They want them to be treated well. This so-called unnecessary risk aversion, which is referred to in documents the government have produced, is an illusion. It is a straw man, and it's been used to put up with other shortcomings. So there are many challenges that we face. We're on, I think, the right track, but we need to go much further and much faster. The public are telling us that they need to see results. We're 2 years into this government now, and for as much as the news cycle is hyper-focused on personality, the King's Speech is all about policy. It's about how we shape a better future, and we show voters that they were right to put their trust in the Labour Party to deliver for them. We all know here, don't we, the perils that lie ahead if we're not bold enough, if we're not determined enough, if we don't use the time that we have here to deliver real change. We are nearing the halfway point of this Parliament, and whilst progress has been made, it is abundantly clear that we need to go much further if we're to show that we have the power to transform the lives of ordinary people in this country. The clock is ticking. Incrementalism will not cut it. We now need a response that rises to the urgent challenges that our country faces. So let's go out there and do it.
Yeah. Sir Desmond Swayne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, in calling me so early on what is the third day of 5 that we are investing in scrutinising this government's programme, at a time when the party of government is abandoning its unique selling point, which was bringing political stability to our economy after a time of so much churn of so many prime ministers in such a short space of years.
Who was responsible for that?
irrespective of who is responsible. The question is, what is happening now? And the reality is that we're facing a danger, notwithstanding the investment of time we're putting into scrutinising the government's programme, that it won't remain the government's programme for very much longer, such as the very different priorities of those who are lining up to take the Prime Minister's job. Now, when the Prime Minister warned his party last week that unleashing a leadership election would bring about chaos, he was quite right. But that chaos comes also with a cost. Such is the horror at the prospects of those who are lining up to take the Prime Minister's job. The markets that fund our gargantuan and growing appetite for borrowing are charging a risk premium, premium higher than was charged of the trust regime and higher than is charged for Greece when they seek to borrow. I'm not a particular fan of the current Prime Minister, but I would ask members opposite, and indeed the voters of Makerfield, who apparently are going to have a rather more significant input in settling this matter, I would urge them to take account of Herr Belloc's cautionary verses, and in particular, the tale of poor Jim, who ran away from nurse and was eaten by a lion. Hold on to nurse, for fear of finding something worse. Now, His Majesty told us that there would be in the legislative programme a bill to strengthen our relationship with the European Union. It's far from clear as to what that actually means. Does the Prime Minister's red lines of no return to a customs union or to free movement or to the single market, do they still hold firm? And do they hold firm in the view of those who have expressed much more enthusiastic agenda for returning to closeness with the European Union among those candidates that are lining up behind him, seeking his job? The fact is that the Labour manifesto said that it was going to make Brexit work. But it's become the excuse for the lacklustre performance of the British economy. Now, there is a measure of cakeism going on opposite, where we have ministers, and we've had one today, the Secretary of State today, tell us how wonderfully they've been doing. They've delivered the fastest economic growth in the G7, much faster than the countries that he identified in the European Union. They've delivered a reduction in inflation. They've delivered interest rate reductions. They've done all these wonderful things, but at the same time, they languish because we're not members of the European Union. We've heard that criticism several times already today. So we'd be doing so much better if we were members of the European Union. The reality is that the European Union is not doing as well as ministers are trumpeting that we're doing. And that's, no, I'm noting the lady has had her turn. The reality is, no, I won't give way. I will not give way. The reality is that they're trying to have cake and eat it. To say that the British economy would be doing so much better than its performance if it were a member of the European Union, whilst trumpeting at the same time its performance. I'm with him. I believe that the reality is that the British economy is performing in a lacklustre way. But I put it to you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the cause of that lacklustre performance is the huge imposition of regulation that was in the preceding King's speech and the delivery of new taxes on employment, on every enterprise in the land that came as part of that deal. And the best King's speech that we could have had would have been a very, very short King's Speech, containing only a statute of repeal to remove all the impositions that were imposed by the last one.
Andy Slaughter.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. What an abrupt end that was. What a cliffhanger. I would like to speak briefly on the justice measures in the King's Speech. There are important bills being introduced or carried over, and it's disappointing that the opposition did not nominate Justice and Home Affairs for a full day's debate, even more so because the other place is today spending its King's Speech debate, debating those very same subjects, and important they are indeed. It's a bit early. All right,
I thank him for giving way on the subject of Home Affairs. As the Liberal Democrat Home Affairs spokesperson, I too am disappointed there is not a day for me to have my say on this, and I will try in this brief intervention on Home Affairs. When I am the spokesperson and I'm opposite the Home Secretary, who makes great play in shouting things at me as if I'm a terrible Liberal making reasonable statements, she tends to imply very strongly that moving to the right, the authoritarian right, the Labour Party is seeing off the challenge of the Reform Party. I wonder whether Labour members opposite are reflecting on that in the wake of the recent election results.
Well, I think I'll just confine my comments, that's a bit off subject, to saying that, as usual, we're all disappointed by the official opposition, but we'll leave it at that. Fortunately, the Justice Committee has been involved in scrutinising some of the legislation being carried over, namely the Courts and Tribunals Bill, now reborn, I believe, as the Courts Modernisation Bill, and the Public Office Accountability Bill, by which I mean the Hillsborough Bill. I hope you're keeping up with these nomenclatures. And I'll just deal with those before outlining what else the committee is doing. So firstly, the Courts Modernisation Bill. The Justice Committee has been engaging closely with the government's proposals for reform of the Crown Court, holding evidence sessions and collecting written evidence to gather views. We've heard from Sir Brian Leveson, whose independent review of the criminal courts formed the basis for the proposed changes, and from a wide range of practitioners, including barristers, solicitors, magistrates, judges, retired judges, and victims' representatives. The government declined to allow the committee to undertake pre-legislative scrutiny, so we have conducted our own on behalf of the House, and next week we'll be publishing a major report with our findings. The passage of the bill through the Commons has been rapid, and there's been little opportunity for scrutiny by members and indeed the wider public of its contents, despite their profound constitutional implications. I hope that the Justice Committee's report...
As a fellow committee chair, does my honourable friend from Hammersmith and Chiswick not agree with me that the government could reconsider how its relationship with select committees and provide more opportunities for pre-legislative scrutiny by committees, which provides such an important role in addressing legislation prior to it coming into its formal stages in this House?
I thank my honourable friend and neighbour, and the answer is it's a balance. We all want the government to press on with all the wonderful things it intends to do that are in the King's Speech, but that must be mitigated with the guiding hand of experienced practitioners like my honourable friend in their select committee roles. So I hope that our report on the bill will make a significant contribution to members' understanding and analysis of the provisions and aid their scrutiny and deliberations. I also hope that ministers will take on board the issues that we're going to raise. Secondly, the Hillsborough Bill, I would like to welcome back this legislation, the result of years of committed campaigning led by the families of the victims and survivors of the Hillsborough disaster and other public tragedies. I spoke at second reading to highlight the areas of the bill where I thought further clarity was required, including the application of the duty of candour to subcontractors, not just those with a direct contractual relationship, the scope of the exemption from the offence of misleading the public for acts done for the purposes of journalism, and how the expansion in legal aid will be funded. I'm pleased to see the government has now published its proposals for the last of those. When the bill's remaining stages take place, I intend to propose amendments to require the government to consider the merits of a national oversight mechanism. This is an independent body tasked with collating, analysing and following up the conclusions and recommendations made in the course of inquests and inquiries. I'll also have my support to amendments relating to the role of the independent public advocate and its information gathering powers and the extension of the duty of candour to subcontractors used by the vast majority of service providers, including, for example, Fujitsu during the Horizon scandal. I look forward to the bill returning so that these issues can be considered in more detail. The National Oversight Mechanism, championed by the charity Inquest, is getting considerable traction. The PACAC and liaison committees are discussing what the best method of ensuring recommendations of inquiries are implemented may be, and the Justice Committee also has an interest in this. We are also exploring the wider issue of how information from inquests can be collated and presented to prevent future deaths, whether or not there is a formal prevention of future deaths report. And to this end, I am tabling amendments to the bill which would establish a national coronial database. Thirdly, the Immigration and Asylum Bill. Since it was announced last August, the Justice Committee has been engaging with the Government's proposal to create a new independent appeals body to speed up decision-making on asylum appeal cases, to be implemented via the bill. In February, we visited the Taylor House Tribunal Hearing Centre in London, where we spoke to senior judges to try and understand the causes of the current high appeal backlog. From speaking to them, it was clear that the failures in the current system, which have led to high appeal backlogs, are operational. They included a shortage of administrative officers to check validity and collect papers, a shortage of court lawyers to issue directions and prepare cases for hearing, inadequate legal aid provision, causing essential legal and evidential groundwork to be performed far too late or not at all, poor or absent Home Office representation at hearings, and failure to comply with tribunal directions on both sides. Replacing judges with adjudicators will not solve these problems. Operational investment in the tribunal infrastructure is clearly required. The committee will endeavour to shine a light on this as the bill goes through the House, but our initial thoughts are that replacing or supplementing judicial decision-making by the first-tier tribunal with Home Office administrators will complicate rather than speed up the process and simply move contentious cases to the upper tribunal or administrative court. In addition to scrutinising this significant legislation over the coming months, the Justice Committee will be concluding and reporting on our inquiries on rehabilitation and resettlement of offenders and access to justice, and progressing our inquiry on children and young adults in the secure estate. And it was very good news earlier to see the white paper on youth justice being launched by the government. We'll be holding individual sessions with senior office holders, including the Attorney General, the DPP and the Lord Chancellor. We will expand our work on tribunals by launching an inquiry on delays in employment tribunals, which currently have a backlog of over 500,000 active claims. We will also want to scrutinise the impact of the reforms contained in the Sentencing Act 2026, both in terms of their effect on the prison population and the probation service, but also on offender rehabilitation and public safety. Finally, there are omissions from the gracious speech which are a matter for regret. Despite broad consensus, there is no measure to reverse the Supreme Court's ruling in PACAR. The committee heard in its Access to Justice inquiry how this is adversely affecting litigation funding. There is no anti-SLAPP legislation proposed, despite substantial evidence of the use of litigation to stifle free speech, nor is there anything to help the victims of press harassment. It is disappointing that calls to introduce a legal right to consular assistance for British nationals arbitrarily detained or abused by foreign governments have been ignored, and that proposals mooted to reform the position of cohabiting couples are absent. Nonetheless, this is a substantial King's speech with a full programme that includes full wholesale reform of leasehold and commonhold and social housing renewal, and closer ties with the EU and nationalisation of the steel industry. It is to be commended and supported in all these aspects, ones that are firmly based on sound Labour principles and who can argue with that?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by congratulating the Right Honourable Lady, the member for Northampton North, on her elevation to her new position, but also reflect on the fact that the subject I want to focus on today, enhancing financial services bill, it does make me look back to the time I was in office for 1,640 days, and the fact that we have had 7 ministers as Economic Secretary since. And I fully concede that there were several from my party, but it is really regrettable that in that role there is not a degree of continuity, because one of the most fundamental challenges facing the financial services sector, which is so important to securing enduring growth, is actually having ministers who are able to maintain a relationship with the regulators and work through what is, contrary to the way that our politics is conducted these days, quite complicated and delicate changes to regulation, to capital requirements, to the way that the consumer interacts with banks and financial services. And I think it is deeply regrettable that that has come to pass. But I do welcome some of the measures in the legislation put before us in the King's speech. The changes to the senior managers regime, removing the degree of certification necessary, the streamlining of the essentially functions of the PSR into the FCA, the re-anchoring of the FOS into the FCA, removing a degree of arbitrage that was existing in the marketplace, and adjustments to the ring fencing regime. Those are good things, and I'm sure on the Treasury Select Committee and across this House we will examine the detail of them. But I want to make 3 other points, if I may, about some of the challenges that we face in the economy and in financial services, because we have got to own the trade-offs that exist, between financial stability and lending capacity. We, post-2008, made a number of decisions as a country to try and secure stability on an enduring basis. And we have now become too reluctant to recognise that the world is in a completely different place. And the question that this House needs to answer in 2026 is whether the same calibration remains appropriate, and whether the proposals in the bill, for example in ring fencing, go far enough. Are we used to holding on to a framework that protects and apparently gives stability, that in fact is stopping significant tranches of capital being available to grow businesses and to grow the economy? And the second area that I'm very preoccupied with is the area around consumer duty. And in the other place, the Lords Financial Services Regulation Committee published a report last year called Growing Pains, which explicitly identified the consumer duty's lack of clarity as a source, and I quote, of regulatory penalty on investment in UK businesses. And I think that what we must do is say, has the time come where responsibility must lie more to the individual consumer on where to invest and how to invest? We are advancing this notion that somehow we in this place are able to define all the checks and balances. We delegate them to the regulator, but the moment something goes wrong, we expect that regulator to step in and to offer compensation. And I think that the emphasis should now be on reforming the Consumer Credit Act, something that I think the government is going to announce today, but it's something that has been taking too long. It was first mooted when I was a minister several years ago. And we have got to be real about that reset that needs to happen as we redefine the level of responsibility that individuals take when investing. I welcome the Growth Bill's sandbox measures. They are welcome as a concept of bringing in innovative businesses for which this country continues to be very strong in financial services. But we have got to be real about the fact that it is dominated by large firms, and the new Economic Secretary will need to work with the regulators to see how we can bring firms in at an earlier stage so that those smaller firms who may have only achieved a few million in seed round investment can actually access the acceleration through that considerable regulatory burden. But I want to finish my remarks by making a few other observations about the state of the economy. Because, of course, all governments intend to do the right thing. And the narrative of this government in its first year was, well, we need to reset, bring stability, and from that growth can come. But I have to say, when I speak to businesses in my constituency and beyond, the burdens of that national insurance increase, of the national living wage, of the uncertainty around fiscal events, and then what happened with the burden of regulation has had a material impact. And it's not enough to suggest that somehow those small businesses or those retail businesses, those hospitality businesses, are not where future growth in the economy as a whole is going to come from. They say something about the level of confidence that the man on the high street feels about where the government is going and where the economy is going. And I fear that what we have created, and widespread reports, notwithstanding the welcome news from the IMF today, if it proves to be true, the overall consensus is that the burden of taxation on business and wealth creators in this country has reached a level that people will not invest in this country. Yeah. And unless that fundamental truth is grasped by this government, we are going to be in a spiral of every few months there might be a little bit of hope with an adjustment of a prediction, but that fundamental trajectory of confidence in the British economy is just not there. And it is reflected in the cost of borrowing, which, whether we like it or not, is the fundamental measure of confidence that the markets have at a time of high borrowing in the future of this economy. So I always try and take a constructive view, and as I have done in my remarks today, I pointed to significant positive things in the Enhancing Financial Services Bill, and there are other elements in the regulatory growth legislation which I also welcome. But let's have some real fundamental honesty about where we are now, notwithstanding all the mistakes that the governments that I've been part of may have made. We are where we are now, and we've got to be real about the challenges that we face to secure enduring confidence and growth in this country.
Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I chose today to speak in this debate on the subject of backing British business because resilience and innovation is where my constituency of Bathgate and Linlithgow punches above its weight. Like many in the post-industrial heartlands, my constituency has changed over the years with the loss of industry. The coal pits, Motorola, Placey and British Leyland, all long gone, leaving deep scars of inequality in our communities. Yet, in Bathgate and Linlithgow, we have a skilled workforce that is strategically located at the heart of Scotland, and it continues to embrace innovation and new industries. Madam Deputy Speaker, after years of underinvestment in national infrastructure and capabilities, we are now entering a new era of industrialisation, fuelled by this government's ambition. Indeed, this House will vote in nationalising British Steel after this Labour government stepped in, saving our steel industry and the future of nearly 2,000 workers. And vocational work and apprenticeships are at the heart of the government's mission for our young people, closing the skills gap and securing the future of our infrastructure, research and innovation. But our appetite for risk and advancement must also hold space for learning and recognise that success isn't built overnight. In my constituency, Linlithgow hosts Origin Peptides, an innovator producing peptides without the nasty forever chemicals, supported by a £7.7 million Innovate UK Sustainable Medicines Manufacturing Grant to scale safer, cheaper production of peptides. Now, we're in an era where global conflicts have inflated energy, fuel and food costs. The Energy Independence Bill is vital for our future, and I look forward to scrutinising it as it comes forward. In Bathgate, Infinity produces the UK's only grid-ready non-lithium batteries. These long-duration transportable batteries are ready to store renewable power for thousands of homes across Britain. Last week, these batteries were installed at Europe's largest site of its kind, capable of powering 3,000 homes. The batteries will harness the power of the sun through solar technology and help deliver the UK's energy security. But how was this achieved? The National Wealth Fund, DESNES and private industry in lockstep, scaling manufacturing and exporting to the world. And this matters not only for business, but for workers and households in Bathgate and Linlithgow, and for new manufacturing across the central belt of Scotland, and indeed for our critical energy independence. Madam Deputy Speaker, backing British business is a choice to invest in our people, to close the skills gap and use £400 billion of public procurement to champion British firms. The measures set out in the King's Speech are not just about telling a different story, but they're about delivering the future that we want to see in our cities, our towns, our villages and in our high streets. Many of our local high street businesses have struggled to recapture the audience that was forced online during the pandemic, and one stubborn issue that we've heard about today time and again is late payments. Late payments, weak excuses and silent clients create cash flow problems for our sole traders and small businesses alike. The Late Payments Bill, long sought after by the Federation of Small Business, is a game changer and just one step to back our high streets, our plumbers, our builders, gardeners and retailers. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must also recognise the success of our Prime Minister and Chancellor, who have steadied business confidence, and this is reflected by the IMF's upgraded forecast today, and who are standing side by side with our allies during global uncertainty, rallying partners across the world. And it would be remiss not to give credit to His Majesty the King, a true statesman who returned home from America having demonstrated British values at their best, care for the world around us and dedication to democratic allies. And most deservedly, His Majesty can enjoy a tariff-free dram. Backing British business means the UK being a proud and ambitious hub for global trade, and this Labour government has delivered trade deals with India and America, creating new markets for our industries. But we must also speak about Europe with the same sense of ambition, and I very much welcome the steps that have been taken thus far, especially with a return to Erasmus+. Our future economic and defence security relies on our collective strength with our European neighbours, so I look forward to considering the European Partnership Bill. From advanced manufacturing in Bathgate to life sciences in Linlithgow, we can see what is possible when government and industry move forward together with purpose. And this King's Speech spells out that ambition to rebuild our industrial strength, to secure our energy future and ensure that opportunity and investment is felt in every community across these isles. Words with action, deeds with purpose to deliver the security, the prosperity and the equity that our constituents deserve.
About rural regeneration and the need to back business and create economic growth in rural areas, because around a fifth of the British population live in rural areas and they have great untapped potential. What we're not seeing is the infrastructure put in place in those areas to allow them to reach that potential and to provide the economic growth that we need. So I've just picked on five areas, to illustrate that point today. Now, the first is digital connectivity. Now, Project Gigabit, which was put in place by the previous government, it seemed like a really, really good idea. The idea of Project Gigabit was to roll out fibre broadband across rural areas in places where it would otherwise not have been commercial and connect businesses and homes so that people could do all the things they need to do online now, whether that's work from home, start up a new business, or just connect their existing business. Now, in Shropshire, that contract was awarded to a company called Freedom Fibre. They were going to roll out fibre broadband to 12,000 properties, but they stalled at 3,500. They couldn't get the funding they needed to connect the rest, and the remaining properties will now be connected by Openreach. But that isn't going to happen until 2030. And that matters because in rural places, perhaps you might have a farm, and you will be allowing other businesses to run from your redundant farm buildings that are past their sell-by date and no good for keeping animals in, for example. Those places don't have fibre broadband, and it means they're not suitable places for start-up businesses to begin to operate from. And the absence of that broadband is really beginning to hold us back. And it's the same story with mobile coverage. Now, Ofcom reports that 1.45% of postcodes aren't with good voice capability in Shropshire, in North Shropshire. And everyone who lives there knows that that's complete rubbish because you can't make a phone call from lots and lots of places. Driving down the A5, pre-screen is a particular black spot that tends to cut me off when I'm speaking to my husband on my way home on a Wednesday night. There are all sorts of places where you really can't make a phone call, and that holds businesses back too. In fact, the River Severn Partnership found that 15.33% of postcodes are without good coverage. And the Rural Services Network says that 65% of rural residents across the country experience unreliable mobile signal. And that really matters if you're trying to run a business, particularly if you're on the road with that business or you're trying to work from home. It holds us back. And we need to see the government put a regulatory environment in place for those businesses that connect us digitally to ensure that rural places are getting the service they need, because at the moment they're being held back by that lack of availability. And just to give you an example, I spoke to a business owner last week who was actually talking to me about cash and getting to the bank, which I will come on to later. But they can't accept payment cards at their premises because they are without a decent signal on any network. And so what they do is they give their bank details to their customers, and their customers go home and make a bank transfer, hopefully. That business is taking on all the risk simply because they can't operate a simple swipe and pay system. So those are the kind of impacts that lack of digital connectivity has on businesses in my area. And if you're a farmer, there are over 1,000 farms in North Shropshire. It really impacts on the way in which you do your business. They're often the worst connected properties. They need to be online to deal with the regulatory environment that they operate in. They might be needing to use GPS systems to work their farm machinery. All of that is a problem if the digital connectivity is poor.
Will the Honourable Lady give way?
I will give way.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and the stories that she's telling about the poor connectivity in her constituency echo what I'm experiencing in mine. Some of the worst broadband, full fibre broadband coverage, certainly in the South East and potentially in the country, despite only being an hour away from London. I did a survey recently of constituents about mobile coverage, and actually, against contrary opinion, many of them, in fact over two-thirds of them, were willing to have more masts in their area because of the change of people working from home and that change of how people are doing business. Does she agree with me that actually we need to be looking forward, making sure that we do have the connectivity in our areas, rather than looking back to a time when people were operating very differently?
Well, I agree with him entirely, actually, and I would question this perception that people's objection to masts is what's holding us back. In Shropshire, passive infrastructure masts have got planning permission, they're ready to go, and what they can't achieve is a mobile phone operator willing to put their equipment on that mast. So we really need to work with the mobile network operators to make sure that we get the connectivity that we need. But I'll move on to public transport. Now, Shropshire's lost 63% of its bus services since 2015, sorry, its bus miles, compared with 19% on average across England. And places like War, which is a village of around 1,000 people in my constituency, have no bus service at all. Others, like Drefonan, have one bus a day. Western Rin residents do have a bus service, but at the moment it just doesn't turn up because of a road diversion. And this is really holding people back. And I will give way to my own friend.
I thank the Honourable Lady. Like me, she represents a very rural constituency, albeit not quite as beautiful as Tiverton and Minehead. I completely concur with her points about rural transport. It's an absolute blocker for economic development, for education, and for so many other things. But would she agree with me that growth is not conjured by debate, it is built by political will? And my constituents and businesses need a functioning road from Watchet to Blue Anchor, a rebuilt school in Tiverton, and a government that fosters the conditions for enterprise to flourish, and that to date this political will has been lacking.
Well, I thank you for her intervention because I think it speaks to the point that rural areas have been looked past by the current government and indeed by the previous government. They've been neglected for many, many years, and if we're going to unleash the potential of those rural areas, we need the political will to invest in them. Now, I mentioned that Shropshire has lost more bus service miles than pretty much anywhere else in the country. But in the funding that was provided early in 2025, Shropshire was the 53rd lowest of 73 allocations, despite being one of the worst served counties in the country. And local businesses tell me, and the local job centre tell me, that not being able to get staff into their businesses are the biggest problem facing them. They struggle to recruit skilled labour, they struggle to get people to them, and that's because there's very, very poor public transport. And if you're someone that can't afford to run a car in Shropshire, you're pretty much stranded where you are. That means if you're a young person looking for their first job, looking to learn the skills needed to work, you probably will struggle to get to work because of the lack of public transport. And trains are a real problem too, and we have been overlooked both in terms of accessibility at Whitchurch Station and the connection between Oswestry and Gabowen, and the trains could be transformational for our area. I mentioned banking services earlier. I welcome the government's review into in-person banking services that was announced last week. There's only one town with a bank in my constituency, and we need to ensure that everybody can access those services that they need, because things like changing a signatory shouldn't require a business owner to drive for many, many miles in order to achieve that. I've had a lot of feedback from businesses in my business that say that banking services are critical. And I will speed up, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I do want to come on to the point of council funding because it's really, really important. Councils are critical for economic development. Shropshire's lost its pride, hasn't got pride in place funding, it's lost the local growth funding, it hasn't been given shared prosperity funding now that's been phased out. That really impacts our ability to attract people into tourism and to regenerate the area. And I would also say that education funding is part of that picture because skills are essential, and where you have low outcomes for your children, having very, very low input into their schools is really problematic as well. Finally, I just want to talk about farming. The family farm tax has held back over 1,068 farms in Shropshire. Milk prices are a real problem. Many of our dairy farmers are producing at lower than cost, and fertiliser and diesel prices soaring because of the war in Iran are causing a huge crisis of confidence in the farming industry. So I look forward to hearing what the government's going to do about generating confidence in our farming industry so that our rural economies can thrive.
Dame Siobhan MacDonald. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The King's Speech sets out this government's commitment to remove the barriers holding back Britain and break through the failed status quo. And nowhere is that more urgently needed than in life sciences and medical innovation. Britain cannot become a world leader in life sciences while patients and researchers are trapped inside systems that move too slowly. That matters because behind every delayed trial and every missed opportunity are families running out of time. This country is uniquely placed to become a world leader in medical innovation. We have extraordinary scientists, extraordinary universities, extraordinary clinicians. Our life sciences sector is one of the greatest strengths of the British economy. From pioneering NHS research to fast-growing British tech bio companies like Relation Therapeutics, the potential for this country to lead the world in medical innovation is enormous. The challenge we face is not whether we have the talent or the capability to lead, it's whether our institutions are capable of matching the urgencies patients need. Because too often, brilliance collides with a system that moves cautiously when it should move decisively. In few areas are the consequences of the slowness felt more acutely than in rare and aggressive cancers. Since losing my wonderful sister Margaret to glioblastoma, the biggest cancer killer for children and adults under 40, I have worked closely with clinicians and researchers searching for a cure. That work has included establishing a new glioblastoma drugs trial in her memory, which is now underway at UCLH and showing encouraging signs. And in doing so, I've seen firsthand how difficult our systems can make innovation. What struck me throughout that process was that even with funding secured, research ready, and patients searching for further options, progress still becomes bogged down in systems moving painfully slowly. Glioblastoma is one of the most aggressive and deadly forms of cancer. At diagnosis, patients are told they have months left, not years. For those patients, delay is fatal. Lord O'Shaughnessy's review into commercial trials found that countries like Spain and Australia are consistently setting up trials more than 2 months faster than in the UK. Too often, our clinical trials environment is still characterised by complexity, duplication and inertia when it should be characterised by urgency. That is not a criticism of the brilliant people working within the NHS or our research institutions. Far from it. Time and again, I have met exceptional clinicians and researchers working tirelessly to push boundaries and give patients more option. But I have also met clinicians who feel constrained by systems that are too slow to turn research into treatment for patients. Britain too often treats innovation as something too cautiously managed rather than urgently to deliver. Lord O'Shaughnessy's review warned that Britain risks losing its world-leading position unless we become faster, more agile and more ambitious. And the warning signs are already there, with the UK falling from 4th to 10th globally for commercial trials between 2017 and 21. The countries that led the world in medical innovation will increasingly lead the world economically too. The global race for investment, talent and scientific leadership is intensifying, and Britain should not simply aim to participate in that race. We should aim to lead it. That's why the NHS modernisation bill announced in the King's Speech matters, because NHS modernisation cannot simply mean changing structures. It must be meaning building a system capable of getting innovation to patients faster. Because if we are truly going to modernise the NHS and remove the barriers holding Britain back, innovation and clinical research must sit at the heart of that mission. Britain has the talent, Britain has the institutions, Britain has the scientific capability. Now we need a system capable of matching that ambition so that it is our country that stands at the forefront of innovation, where the next generation of medical breakthroughs are discovered and delivered. And for the families facing terminal illness today, that progress cannot come quickly enough. Robert Henry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, what a complete shambles. Less than 2 years ago, this government was elected with the largest majority any government has been elected, bar one, in 100 years. People across our country, including most in my home county of Nottinghamshire, put their trust in this party. Why? Because they promised change. They said they would do things differently, they would be better, they would end the chaos, they would put country before party. And where are we? Where are we less than 2 years later?
You're in a different party.
We're here. We're here. Where are we? We're here.
You used to be there.
We're here. Well, the honourable member says, why did I change party? Well, I'll tell you why I changed party. I'll tell you why I changed party. Because millions of people across this country look upon the performance of the last government as this one, and they say these are wasted years, that our country needs real change, and yet we see nothing for it. This government, let's be honest with ourselves, lies in ashes. It's failed. An air of unreality hangs over this debate. Members queue up to speak as if this is a normal King's speech. The Prime Minister summoned the King, the crown, the golden carriages, the fanfares of the trumpets. For what? To paper over the cracks of his failing government. This, as we all know, is a lame duck government presided over by a lame duck Prime Minister. Where is the Prime Minister? He's in his bunker. Where's most of the cabinet? They're plotting. I'm surprised that so many members are here. Maybe they're filling in the time before the change of government. These have been wasted years. This is what Winston Churchill said of the 1930s when he described them as years that the locusts eaten. Totally wasted time. At a moment where in our hearts, each and every one of us know this country faces the most profound challenges, at least since the 1970s, perhaps more so. We have stagnating economic growth. We have rapid deindustrialization of our country. We have demographics that pose immense challenges. We have public finances that are on the rocks and getting worse with every passing day. We've got out of control illegal migration. We've got social cohesion challenges of the type we've never known as a country. Our streets feel increasingly lawless. Our town centres are hollowed out. And these problems cannot all be placed at the door of this Labour government. They are as a result, let me finish my point, they are as a result of 25 years of failed politics in this country by both of the two main political parties and all those that have gone along with it. And yes, I hold myself partly responsible for that. That is why I chose to walk away from that party and to do something new. But I'm afraid today we see on each and every one of those measures, things are getting worse. 70,000 people have crossed on small boats.
Brexit.
I'll give way in a moment. Mass migration remains rampant. The public finances are getting worse. Look what the markets are saying, where the cost of borrowing is going up and the pound is falling. Unemployment is rising. Great proud industries, like one in my constituency the other day, NSK, a business that makes steel ball bearings, gone bust because of uncompetitive energy prices and unfair competition from China. Hundreds of people thrown onto the scrap heap now looking for new jobs in North Nottinghamshire. Unemployment, youth unemployment, the worst that we've known it. Record high taxes and borrowing. Our country is in a mess. Britain is broken. And yet so little is being done.
It's your mess.
And even where the government has acted, we all know it's made things worse. Look at our farmers. Look at our farmers. The attempt by the Chancellor to impose the family farms tax, only partially U-turned upon, has caused immense pain and suffering to thousands of farmers across our country, including many in my own rural constituency of Nottinghamshire. I went earlier last year to meet a farmer in West Yorkshire whose father had taken his own life by hanging himself in a barn the night before the budget. because he had read the briefing that the Chancellor had put out. Correct. But wrongly feared that the measure would come in the next day. He killed himself. He's not alone. Think of the pain and suffering that some of members of our armed forces have felt as a result of the thus far failed attempt to deal with the issues in Northern Ireland. The bravest of the brave, the men who served in Northern Ireland during the period of the Troubles, now facing a knock on the door or a letter through the letterbox, whilst the last government, for all its failings, attempted to give a degree of immunity to those men so that they would never have to live out the last days of their life facing prosecution in the courts or wasting their life savings on legal fees. Think of what's happening to businesses the length and breadth of our country. The cost of employing people going through the roof as a result of the Chancellor's national insurance increases, making it more difficult to employ people just at a moment where unemployment is rising, where AI is transforming our economy. We're a 95% service-based economy, one of the most exposed economies in the Western world to AI. Just the moment to increase the cost of employing people. Look at small businesses like pubs being battered by increases in business rates and every single cost. I will give way in one moment. I'll come back to the honourable gentleman. On every measure where the government has tried to do things, it's made things worse. I'll give way.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I do thank him for giving way. He's clearly rehearsed his speech well in front of the mirror. And so I do thank him. But he's been speaking now for 7 minutes. I fear he's learnt well from his master, and I don't mean the one in Thailand. There's long description with all the problems in the country, but no solutions. 7 minutes without a positive policy offer for this people in this chamber and also for his constituents. 7 minutes.
Let me give the honourable gentleman some then. Because we all know this King's speech is not worth the paper that it's written on. There's nothing in it. It is, as a former minister, made up of the very policies that officials draw out of the third drawer of a desk and hand to weak, inept ministers who have no ideas of their own and say, here you go, minister. Here's a substitute for your own thoughts. Well, I'll tell you some things that we would do. I'll tell you some things that Reform would do, were there a Reform government. Number one, we would get a grip on the ballooning benefits bill. Let's get the millions of people in this country who are out of work back into the workplace. In order to get the benefits bill down as a moral imperative, why write off millions of our fellow citizens, especially the young? How can people be off work with mild anxiety? How can we have people claiming PIP who haven't even been to a face-to-face appointment with a genuine clinician? This is madness. It has to change. Of course we want, as a country, a proper safety net. But that's not what we have today. We all know it. At the moment, we have a farce where people are choosing not to work. That can change. It won't change under this Labour government, but it can change, and we can save billions of pounds for it. Okay, I'll give you a second then. We'll scrap net zero so that we end the deindustrialisation of our country. Steel, chemicals, fertilisers, glass, ceramics, car making. Jobs, 2 million jobs depend on high energy intensive industries. All will be gone within the next 10 years. And I wager that many members opposite represent the good, decent, patriotic Brits who work in those businesses. You are selling them down the river. We need to end net zero, adopt a pragmatic and intelligent way to decarbonise our economy that doesn't immiserate working people and ruin what remains of our heavy industry. Those are two things that we could do. I'll give you a last one. End illegal migration. And the way that we do that, is not merely to stop the boats, but to end the farce that people come here on ILR, knowing that they will ultimately become citizens of this country on a short path and cost hundreds of billions of pounds to the Exchequer. Now, the Labour Party has a policy, we're told, that takes us some way to that. But then we have the Right Honourable Lady for Ashton-under-Lyne saying that the Home Secretary should be sacked for having the audacity to propose some pretty weak but nonetheless sensible changes to our legal and illegal migration systems. That gives you a clue about what is to come. So I'll finish on this point, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today is a pantomime. Today is a pantomime. We know this King's Speech doesn't exist. We know this King's Speech will be chucked into the dustbin in a few months' time. Maybe there'll be another King's Speech. What we know is what follows will almost certainly be worse. The fate of our country, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, doesn't rest on what's happening in this chamber. It rests on the Labour Party members who will choose the next Prime Minister. Because the Prime Minister's finished. We all know that. And what comes then will be more failed policies, no answers to the challenges that face our country, no response to the yearning that there is in the country for real change. The only way to achieve that, and we all know, is a general election.
And the honourable member will know that mentioning other colleagues in the chamber, we will make sure those colleagues are given fair warning in advance. If that hasn't already been done, I assume it will be done very swiftly. Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As much as I enjoy lectures from the widow Twankey of reform, I see this King's Speech as an opportunity for all of us to reflect on the anger I suspect we all heard on the doorsteps in every constituency across this country in the local elections. But in order to do that, we have to be honest with ourselves about the anger that we may feel. Because how can many of us who say we believe this country is stronger together, we believe that love is stronger than hate, not accept when we are angry ourselves too? I have to be honest, this weekend I bumped into the Unite the Kingdom protesters, many of them swaggering with a beer in hand through my local station, and I honestly felt a guttural sense of anger, which isn't right, because I don't know those people. I don't know their motivations, but in our current political environment, angry was how I felt. Angry because my sense was their sense of uniting this kingdom would not include my beloved Walthamstow, a community where we pride ourselves on the diversity of thought, of background, of cultures that we all share. Although I can promise everyone in this room they will know well they're of one mind when it comes to the importance of bin collection, stopping fly tipping and Thames water not ripping up the roads. One in which now my Muslim neighbours are scared and my Jewish neighbours are fearful because of the violence, intimidation and fury that is in this place and in our culture wars where they are used as cannon fodder. But if I'm honest, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think my anger was also at myself, because I bumped into those people because I've been in central London at one of those political conferences that, again, I think all political parties have on Saturdays, where the same kind of speech is made by all of us using the same buzzwords that we've all been using for the last 20 years. The kind of comfort zone of political life where everyone nods along but no answers are provided. This country is crying out for answers. I think we are all agreed on that. But the honest truth is, they're not sure they're coming from this place. And that is the test that the King's Speech has to be able to deal with. The change that everybody wants in every corner, in every community, and from every citizen. Because nobody thinks right now anything's working in the way that it should be doing. Because as ever, the problem isn't Muslims or Jews or bankers. It's politicians. It's us. Whether here or in Palestine or Gaza or the White House or the Kremlin. If we want to show the public that we can build a better world through debate, decision-making and discourse, then it starts with us and what we spend our time doing here on behalf of this nation. Whether actually this King's Speech offers the difficult questions and answers that this country needs to face the world that we are in. Now, the reason why I spend too much time at weekends right now talking politics is because for my sins I am the chair of the Labour Movement for Europe. So yes, I look at this King's Speech and the European Partnership Bill and think how Brexit has broken all of us. Whether you voted Leave or Remain, the evidence is indisputable that it has not turned out how anybody thought it would. The jobs, the businesses that have been lost. The member for New Forest West asked, what's the problem? Go and speak to the 16,000 businesses who've just given up trading altogether because the only benefit of Brexit was to paperwork creators. Because we all walked out of the room when we needed to be in the room to face the challenges of the modern world, whether they were national security, trade, or the climate crisis that we now face. So this isn't a call for rejoin, because that relationship with Europe is gone. and it will be a long time before we're able to rebuild it. But it is a call for us to recognise how damaging that has been to the chances that we can make as a country and why we do need to rebuild that relationship. Now, this bill will do deals on food, emissions trading and electricity. They are all needed, and they are all not enough to answer that challenge that our communities are facing to us. How does life get better for us? It only makes sense for us to have this argument again, and many of us who were here at the time will be deeply triggered already by some of the things that have been talked about, if we're talking about a relationship that makes sense in 2026 and 2028, not 2016 and 2019, one that recognises in the last 6 months we were threatened with the invasion of Greenland, of the continued aggression in Ukraine, and of that climate crisis. That means that we have to look again at the single market and the customs union, and yes, freedom of movement, and any political party that denies that those conversations need to have isn't being honest with the public, because a customs union alone will not cut it. So let me say it, and the member opposite may be surprised at this. I agree with the member for Clacton when he said we should get a deal that looks like the Switzerland deal. So I hope he would be here today, and I'm sorry he's not here, I hoped he would be, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be able to refer to him, to agree with me that in order to do that, we need to put behind us the fights of the past, the old red lines, and use this bill to give the government the negotiating mandate to do it. And also, frankly, to do what this place consistently fails to do, which is put families first. Because if we hadn't left the European Union, by now, every family, every parent would have proper rights to paid leave to be with their kids. And we would finally be able to tackle the gender pay gap and the motherhood penalty. That's why we have to ensure that this bill doesn't just align for food, it needs to align for families, to put workers and their needs at the heart of a new deal with Europe and not just businesses. So I want to give notice that I will be trying to amend this bill to give this place the chance to fix what it missed in the last session, the missing piece of employment rights that businesses overwhelmingly support, that means that dads and second parents will get the same rights as their European counterparts. And in the process of doing that, we also need to fix the mistake that was made in the last session when we removed the European Scrutiny Committee, so that members here could actually be part of writing that legislation. Again, something I know that colleagues who may disagree on the outcome of the European relationships that we might want to build have, but would agree that it's time to take back control to this place. This bill, this legislation, this King's Speech has to be the opportunity to show our constituents that we get it, the challenges and barriers that they face in their lives. And the honest truth is, it should be a place for discussion, because none of this legislation is good to go. But it can be amended through the parliamentary process to get there. So let's start with things like making sure people have confidence in our democracy. Of course we need a representation of the People's Bill. There are 5 million reasons why we need to stop cryptocurrencies and company donations corroding people's sense of confidence in British democracy. But we also need to end the loopholes that exist, capping donations for individuals and from individuals too. That those who can get millions of pounds personally or use third-party organisations to hide their tracks, well, that damages all of us all together. It's why absolutely we've got to get the SEND reform process right, because for too long as MPs we've heard those vulnerable stories, seen the frustrations and recognised too often it's the tribunal that's been the place of resolution. Why we have to get leasehold reform and the social housing bill through, because housing is the cause of poverty in so many communities, particularly in mine. And yes, it's also why we have to get conversion therapy banned, because trans people are living in fear in this country right now, and that cannot be right for our fellow human beings. It's also why we need the Energy Independence Bill to work. I want to put the E in E17 to be energy, because in my community we are stepping up to the plate to use our collective bargaining power to lower our energy bills by seeking bulk discounts on solar panels. But we need the government to work with us to get us that interest-free loans to make sure that we as a community can bring everyone together in that energy transition. And that's why we don't want the government to be caught up in fighting to get rid of juries, when really if we want to help victims, we bring in specialist rape courts. And it's why, yes, we need to have the difficult conversations on immigration, because we are proud in my community in Walthamstow of the contribution of our neighbours, whether they were born here or they made their homes here. So when we see people attacking people on indefinite leave to remain, the people who are our nurses, our doctors, our scientists, our friends, our neighbours, we don't see a kingdom being united. We see people playing with culture wars rather than looking at the economic case and why we want to see this legislation reflect the benefits of immigration to our society. I will defend to my death the right of people to disagree with me, to hold different opinions about the future of this country and to resolve those through the democratic process. But I will not let myself be silenced or sidelined by them. Because Maya Angelou taught us that hate can cause a lot of problems, but it hasn't solved a single one yet. So I know in my heart of hearts, Madam Deputy Speaker, me feeling angry at the world solves nothing, including at people I didn't know in my local train station. It's up to all of us in this place to rehabilitate politics through this session, to use the King's Speech to show we are truly capable of bold, radical thought. I hope to play my part in presenting ideas to my colleagues and to secure their support cross-party to make that happen, because this country needs and deserves nothing less.
Kirsty Blackman, after which there will be a speaking limit of 5 minutes. Kirsty Blackman.
I'll give you a heads up now that I'm going to mention a number of MPs, all of whom I have contacted in advance to let them know that I will be mentioning them. Madam Deputy Speaker, talking about a few of the things that were mentioned earlier today, there's been an awful lot of talk about regulation during the course of this debate. I would remind the Conservatives that the vast bulk of regulation that businesses are labouring under just now was created during the 14 years of office that they had, or prior to the 14 years of office that they were in. A huge amount of the regulation that is affecting businesses that put things abroad and sell things overseas is because of Brexit. There are many, many reasons that regulation has come in, and not all of them, I'm afraid, are this Labour government. I do agree that it would be important to listen to businesses, something the Labour government are singularly failing to do. When they're asking for easy changes, small changes to be made that will make their lives significantly easier, I think the Labour government, I think all governments should be listening to those businesses and considering making the changes. The government has, since 2024, been mired in a stagnation. It doesn't seem to be able to do or achieve anything. We saw that some of the bills that were suggested, some of the pre-consultation draft bills that were suggested in the last King's Speech, never made it to Parliament. We never saw those bills. So how can we believe that all of the things that were put forward in the King's Speech, even without the current level of chaos, are likely to actually come before this Parliament to allow us to make decisions on it? In terms of some of the regulation stuff, the Office for Tax Simplification was began by the Conservative government. The Office for Tax Simplification was cancelled by the Conservative government. If we need a simpler tax system, then surely an Office for Tax Simplification would have been the sensible route to try and improve the simplification of the tax system. But it's not the only burden that is faced, and I do agree that simpler regulations, regulations that make sense, regulations that are there for a purpose and not just because they're the regulation that we had 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, those are the regulations that we need to ensure that people are kept safe, that businesses can be profitable and that businesses can export wherever they want to. In terms, lastly, on the red tape parts of it, of pension funds, there is still more, despite the Pension Schemes Bill, which I largely supported, there is still more that can be done to free up some of that money that is in pension funds. I would love to see more pension fund money going, for example, into social houses, so that we can build more social housing. You know you get a return on social housing. You absolutely do. People pay rent on those social houses. You get that return. I would love to see that flexibility put in so that smaller scale energy projects, for example, renewable energy projects for communities and social housing could be something that the government is creating pipelines for, so that pension funds can invest our money. Remember, it's our money that are in these pension funds. It's not being invested in the places where we would see that growth in both living standards and we would see the growth in the economy that comes from it. Just touching on my constituency and jobs in Aberdeen. I met recently with an organisation, a business in my patch called Lowe's Traditional Fish and Chips. Now, Lowe's Traditional Fish and Chips, we call them chippers in Aberdeen. I know nobody else does. Everybody calls them chippies. We call them chippers. They are an excellent chipper, and they have talked to me about the increase in their energy costs. The energy costs that they have provided of more than that they pay for what they need is more than tripled. And I think it's really important that the UK government considers this seriously when it's putting targeted support for businesses. It's not just those high energy businesses that are maybe, having to use significant to make ceramics or whatever it is that they're making with a significant amount of electricity or gas, but those smaller businesses that are using significant amounts of heat, for example, in order to cook fish and chips, haddock in Aberdeen, generally not cod. So businesses like that need to be thought of in the Chancellor's announcements that she's making on Thursday, potentially, or later this week, around energy costs. In terms of oil and gas jobs in Aberdeen are disappearing like sna off a dike, which means very, very quickly. They are disappearing incredibly quickly. The legacy of the Conservative government creating the EPL, this government not listening to people. And this lot can talk about drilling all that they want. If they cancel renewables, there's no future for our energy industry. This lot can talk about renewables all they want, but unless we fill this gap in between, all of those folk from my constituency, people from across the North East, the engineers, the people who are innovating, the people that are creating amazing products in order to ensure that we can exploit the energy and provide energy security, they're going to go away. They're going to go to Malaysia to work. They are not going to be here paying taxes and inventing those things. We need both. Neither of the two main parties are offering that.
On that point, I thank my friend for giving way. Would she agree that it was folly on the part of this government to cancel the Minyang project at Ardisir?
I absolutely do agree. Looking at the local jobs that would have been created, and we know that we've got rural population decline. We know that what we need to do is to encourage people to move to these rural areas and create those jobs in these areas. We know that the UK government and the past UK government have failed the people of the northeast of Scotland that work in energy, that work in those industries, and we need change or those jobs are going to continue to disappear. We've put in an amendment to the King's speech. The amendment is Amendment C, and the amendment says, having lost confidence in your leadership... Oh, no, that's the member for Ilford North that said that. Sorry, that's not our amendment. I'll try again. The amendment actually says, it is clear that the Prime Minister no longer has the trust or confidence of the public to lead this change. No, that's the member for Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy. Apologies. I will try again to find the amendment that's on the Prime Minister and the confidence that we have in the Prime Minister. What about, it's in the best interest of the country and the party that the Prime Minister sets out a swift timetable to ensure that a new leader is in place to regain the confidence of the public. No, that was the member for Hexham that said that. I'll try, I'm sure I've got it here somewhere. It's clear that the Prime Minister no longer has the trust or confidence of the public or large swathes of the PLP. No, that was the member for Glasgow South. The Prime Minister has failed to instil confidence in his leadership. That was the member for York Central. Sorry, I'll find the amendment. It's somewhere here, I'm sure of it. The public across the UK has now irretrievably lost confidence in you as Prime Minister. That was the member for Glasgow South West. I'm sure the amendment is here somewhere.
He said what?
It's clear from countless conversations that my constituents have lost confidence in him. That was the member for Halesowen. We're nearly... I'm sure it's here. You, Prime Minister, have lost the trust and confidence of the public. That was the member for Peckham. The amendment says, but respectfully regret to inform your Majesty that the Prime Minister does not have the confidence of this House. Given my amazing confusion that I was able to have between what's been said by a significant number of members on that side and my amendment, which is almost the same wording, very, very similar wording to what so many members have said in public, I'm assuming, Madam Deputy Speaker, that our amendment will be by far the most popular one. It very clearly has significant levels of cross-party support. In fact, I haven't heard one person stand up today in the chamber and talk about the confidence that they have in the Prime Minister. So I'm looking forward to the situation where...
Trade-in boy.
I do thank you to Madam Speaker, and I do thank her for giving way and for the fun she's having just now, and she's entertaining us all. But I remember the shambolic end to Hamza Yousaf's tenure as First Minister in Scotland. And it was shambolic, she will admit that. But what advice can she give us, having reflected on that period in her party? It was a real crisis for her party and for Scotland. What advice does she have for people on this side? What did she learn from that process?
It will be short because there are many members wishing to contribute. Kirsty Blackman.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will try and give a short piece of advice. I think if I was in the Scottish Labour Party, I would either say that we are a separate party from UK Labour and we make our own decisions, or I would say that we back the Prime Minister. I mean, you know, it's very clear that Anna Sarwar, the leader of Scottish Labour, does not back the Prime Minister and does not have confidence in it. And he and many of his MSPs and MPs have said that they're a separate party and they make their own decisions. I'm assuming, therefore, that he follows the Scottish leader and supports the ending of the Prime Minister's reign and is looking forward to that, like all of his colleagues. Madam Deputy Speaker, like I said, I think our amendment can hardly fail to be the most popular amendment that is put forward, given so many members around the House have explicitly stated how much they support our position and will vote for it on Wednesday, I'm sure.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome many of the measures in this gracious speech, including legislation to strengthen our relationship with the European Union. Brexit has been an unmitigated disaster that the evidence always suggested it would be. And it is the government's responsibility both to act in the national interest by seeking to build closer alliances with the EU, but also to continue to work to build a national consensus that it is in the UK's economic, security and cultural interests to do so. We are focused on economic growth in this debate this afternoon. Economic growth depends on a strong and sustainable education system at every level. My committee's recent report on higher education funding makes clear that universities, anchor institutions in their local and regional economies, are facing unprecedented financial pressure with a real risk of insolvency and no clear plan for managing it. If we are serious about economic growth, we must be serious about the financial sustainability of the institutions that underpin it. And so, in addition to the measures in this gracious speech, I urge the Government to take with the utmost seriousness the recommendations of my committee about the steps that are needed to stabilise our university sector. But I want to focus the remainder of my remarks today on the proposed Education for All bill. This legislation sits at the centre of the Government's support for children with special educational needs and disabilities. Too many families still have to fight to secure the right help for their children. Too many children wait months, sometimes years, for essential support. And too many teachers and school leaders are being asked to meet growing and complex needs in a system stretched beyond capacity. So I welcome the Government's acknowledgement that this cannot continue and the aim of generational reform to raise standards and build a more inclusive education system. The emphasis on early intervention, on support close to home and on collaboration across education, health and care reflect many of the recommendations made by my committee. The move towards earlier identification of need is right and necessary. National inclusion standards could help to address the deeply entrenched postcode lottery that families face and provide a baseline for accountability. Investment in workforce training and multidisciplinary support through initiatives like Experts at Hand shows understanding that inclusion relies on professional expertise as well as good intentions. But there are, Madam Deputy Speaker, legitimate concerns about capacity within the SEND system and the resources needed to deliver effective and impactful reforms. And parents and carers have been expressing significant anxiety about some of the proposals in the Government's draft reforms, which could both reduce access to existing backstop accountabilities and risk exacerbating friction between parents and carers and schools. If the Education for All bill is to succeed, it must be matched by the resources and workforce planning needed to turn its vision into reality, and it must be based on the lived experience of children, families and the professionals who work with them. Any reform of education, health and care plans must strengthen, not weaken, the ability of families to secure the